The first thing you notice isn't the cold or the brittle light leaking around the curtains. It's the band of pressure wringing your ribcage like a clenched fist that belongs to no one and everyone. It's there before thought, before the taste of last night's chalky tooth powder or the ache in your shoulders from sleeping too straight on a mattress that crackles like a paper bag. You open your eyes, and the room is a watercolor of grays. Frost traced on the inside of the glass, your breath sketching its ghost on the air. The ash-scented shadow where the fire died while London was still awake. Time to rise. Ma'am, Agnes has a way of entering without disturbing the air, as if walls open and close for her. She is already flushed from the scuttle between hearths, eyes bright with coal soot and purpose, hair talked into a bun that will loosen as the day leaks through it. She's placed warm water on the stand and set your clothes to breathe on the screen near the embers. She looks tired. You notice. You tell yourself it matters. But all your noticing does not add a single spoonful of comfort to her morning or yours. Is it necessary today? Your voice is a scratch on glass. I'm only visiting Mother. Agnes does not sigh because sighing implies judgment. She does the second best thing, the pause that holds every morning's argument in it. The look that says, this is the way of things, and we both know the price of deviating. Your mother would be the first to notice if you weren't properly dressed. Ma'am, she says, smoothing the words flat so they'll fit through your corset's eyelets. Properly dressed. You look at the array on the dressing table, whalebone and silk, fastenings and little knives of steel. An arsenal pretending to be clothing. The corset lies there like a question that has only one answer. Edged in blue ribbon you once chose with pride. You remember that day. A breath held too long in the fitter's booth, the mirror gilding your resolve, the measuring tape whispering promises. 18. The number glowed like a saint's halo once. Now it glowers like a ledger's negative balance. You slip into the chemise, white, thin, the soft treaty that keeps your skin from negotiating directly with the bones and teeth of fashion. Cotton drawers tie carelessly at the waist. The kindness of warmth is immediate, like a stray sunbeam. Small mercies come in stitches. Agnes lifts the corset. You can tell she likes this one, for craftsmanship if not for cruelty. It is beautiful, in the way a cage might be if decorated by someone who never plans to live inside it. Deep breath, ma'am. You take the last of the morning, draw it in, and hold it like a guilty secret. The busk kisses your sternum with a chill. The laces whisper down your spine. The first tug is a reminder. The second is a promise. By the fifth, your heartbeat has opinions about ceilings. Agnes works with the practiced cadence of someone who has made peace with necessary harm. Her palm is a metronome at your waist. The laces sing a thin, treacherous music. Just a bit more, you hear yourself say, in the voice of a woman who has learned to ask for the thing she dreads to avoid asking for the shame she dreads more. Agnes braces a foot against the bedstead. You grip the carved post like a ship in sudden weather. The room tightens with you. Your lungs become cupboards. Your organs shuffle like housemaids when guests arrive unexpectedly. There now, Agnes murmurs, knotting the victory at your spine. Beautiful. The mirror insists she is right. The glass never tires of lies it can tell sincerely. Your waist arches inward like an argument. Hips flare, bosom lifts. The sacred geometry of desirability solved again in knots and wail. For a moment the transformation is intoxicating. Then the world narrows to a straw and you sip air through it. Careful as a lady sipping consommé. You remember Dr. Harrison's hands. The way he held up those diagrams as if unveiling crime scenes. Liver shoved upward like an afterthought. Stomach crimped like a folded letter never to be read again. He called it organ displacement, with a straight face, as if your insides were mislaid luggage that might be forwarded to the proper address if only someone paid the right fee. Your mother called him dramatic. Your friends call him impertinent. You call him in your head at night when your heart knocks on your ribs and asks if the war is still going. Petticoats next. Cotton to begin. Then the weightier ones, each layer a paragraph on your body's grammar. Fabrics add pounds as the morning adds expectations. The bustle follows, a little iron bridge that the fashion has built behind you. It makes chairs hypothetical and conversations vertical. When it hooks at your waist, you feel the arithmetic of pain change, The fulcrum moves, the leverage doubles. I read about a woman in America, you say, because distraction is a cousin of relief. Amelia Bloomer. She wears trousers. Agnes's eyebrows react before her mouth. On a lady? The question contains a neighborhood, a church pew, a mother's disapproval. Under a skirt. You offer compromise like a peace treaty written in pencil. They say it's easier. Easier isn't always proper. Ma'am, proper is the city you live in without ever leaving your house. Buttons. So many they should have their own parish. March down your spine on Agnes's quick, considerate fingers. The blue silk lays over you with a sigh. Blue. The color your husband says makes you fresh. You wonder if he would recognize the cost of that freshness, laid out on a table like receipts. Your mother sent this, Agnes says, as if producing a trinket, and sets a bottle in your palm. A man's name on the label. Dr. Campbell's Complexion Wafers. The print promises youthful fairness. The word you read between the lines is arsenic. In small doses, Agnes adds, because rumor always includes dosage. You think of the socialite whose hands trembled over tea, the friend's cousin with the persistent digestive complaint that ended as a funeral. You set the bottle down as if it might bite. I'll pass today. Agnes's eyes flick to your reflection. She takes the wafer of defiance, wraps it in her silence, and tucks it away on your behalf. Powder comes instead. Fine, floating bismuth dust that will sit on your skin like frost all day. The Belladonna waits in its vial. You know what it does. Know how the world goes pleasantly soft at the edges. How men call your widened pupils luminous, as if you were a lamp they lit. You also know how sunlight becomes a threat and print becomes a sea. One drop in each eye. Agnes tilts your head with the care of a priest, blessing the faithful. Sting, then bloom. Your eyes become apricots in winter, sweet and improbable. Rouge, she offers. Please, light. You trust the harmlessness of carmine more than anyone's assurances about lead. Do you ever loosen it? You ask, surprising yourself with the intimacy of the question. Your corset? Her fingers still for a breath on the ribbon at your shoulder. At night, she admits, voice dropped like a coin that might be heard in the wrong pocket. Sometimes, just to remember, the confession warms the room. You are not sisters, not friends, not in a way society would recognize, but you share a battleground under your dresses. Class separates the size of the cage, not the fact of it. Downstairs the house makes its morning noises, the urge and hush of a domestic tide. You take the stairs like a negotiation, hand on the rail, chin up because you must carry your discomfort as if it were an heirloom you are proud to display. Breakfast is arranged, sensible and steaming, but your stomach has been folded to half its height. It will take macaroon bites of toast and argue them all morning. Your husband's newspaper glitters with opinions that do not require your breath to express. He will be at the club, the Hendersons tomorrow. You will make an effort. Of course you will. Every day is largely effort disguised as routine. The vanity is a chemist's bench, jars, vials, little pots with murderous histories. Ammonia cream that sings a bright, mean song up your nose and promises to erase the honest color of living. Mercury lotions that shine like answers and behave like questions you cannot stop answering. Lead white that would like to make your face a statue. Agnes tells you Lady Caroline swears by this, Mrs. Whitmore by that, because gossip is the instruction manual women are allowed. Belladonna, she asks again apologetically, for the afternoon light. One drop, you say. Already the world has put her hands on your shoulders. You will lean into the pressure because that is what good women do. The blue silk is fully yours now. It has taken you. You look beautiful, if beautiful means the thing they asked for. You also look like a problem solved by violence. Your ribs whisper the word bruise in a language only you speak. Shallow breaths feel like politeness. The mirror is satisfied. The mirror is not the one who will walk into the day. On the edge of your desk, under letters from your aunt and the circular from the linen draper, sits a little pamphlet your husband's cousin called Nonsense, while pocketing it for you with a wink. The Rational Dress Society. You have hidden it like contraband, because in this house ideas are more dangerous than arsenic if they weaken a reputation. You have skimmed it by candlelight, your breath loosening as if the words could untie laces. Agnes notices where your gaze goes and nudges the blue skirt so it falls in obedience. Some battles can't be won in a day, she says. Kindly, and there it is, an allowance, a prayer, perhaps a plan. You step into the corridor and the day rises to meet you with all its stares and manners and practiced smiles. Every movement becomes choreography. Sinks are approached sideways. Chairs are perched upon, not used. Doors require the geometry of hips you are permitted to have, and knees you are allowed to bend. When a maid hurries past, eyes wet and frightened, and asks to borrow Agnes, it's Lady Russell next door. Collapsed, you feel the careful latticework of your own composure sway. Loosen her stays, you say before you stop yourself. You are not supposed to know such things. But you know, all women know, even when they pretend not to. Agnes's eyes meet yours, and something passes there. Permission, perhaps, or gratitude. She goes. Alone for a space, you stand in the middle of your room and listen to your body complain in the language of small pains. You consider the arithmetic of your day, the tasks, the inspections, the letters, written in a hand that must look effortless and urgent at once. You will order duck, but not the duck that says vulgarity. You will select linen that whispers money instead of shouting it. You will arrange flowers so the room smells like gentility rather than garden. All of this will be done by people you pay and people you do not pay enough. And all of it will be credited to the household, and credited to your husband ultimately, because the ledger of a marriage is not kept by the one who does the counting. Upstairs again. Later, Agnes returns, Lady Russell revived. The stays loosened, the husband displeased. The story is an old one with new names told every week across the city. You nod as if the city's asthma is a weather report. You pick up your pen and soften your handwriting around the edges of the truth. You do not reach for the arsenic wafers. You do not put on the heavy pearls that drag your earlobes like little anchors. You are learning to say no in ways that do not echo. By noon, the house is the instrument you must play. Kitchen range that smokes when it wants drama. Parlor curtains pricked by a stain you must anticipate before Mrs. Henderson's finger does. A fishmonger who believes he can sneak in a tired salmon because women do not know how to look at gills. You look at gills. You decline with a smile that does not include your eyes. Your back aches in the language of cantilevers. Your lungs practice a smaller alphabet. You go on. A delivery arrives. Your new church hat, which is not a hat so much as a pond bordered by lace and feather. The milliner admires it with you, as if you had no part in paying for the deaths of small, bright creatures who used to flash in South American skies. A hatpin like a rapier is provided, because marvels must be fastened to heads as if they plan to escape. The pin slides home with the same small thrill and guilt as a secret kept. When the day leans toward its afternoon pallor, the Belladonna makes the window too generous with light. Your eyes are oceans. Everything nearer is a coastline with soft edges. You sign your letters with care and wish you could read your own decisions clearly. You pause at your writing desk long enough to open the pamphlet again. Your thumb finds the place it loves, lines about health, comfort, and beauty consistent together. You imagine breathing without calculating. You imagine walking like a person instead of a proposition. You imagine your daughters seeing you survive conventions without letting them devour you. Ma'am, Agnes's voice is the tether back to this room. Shall I fetch the shawl? The dining room is cool. Yes, you say, because yes is the word that wins you safety. The grey. You let her settle it around your shoulders and hide the ribbon of the pamphlet before she turns away. You think of Lady Russell's husband of your own, of the Henderson girl whose life is a waste to be negotiated. You think of the cousin who passed the pamphlet with a joke, because jokes are how dangerous things travel. The mirror takes one last look at you before you go. It sees a lady. You see a campaign. The dress is a treaty you keep signing because the country you live in is patrolled by eyes. But you have begun quietly to redraw the map under your clothes. You have discovered the border between refusal and survival. You have hidden a contraband dream in your desk that fits in your palm and in your lungs. Down the stairs, the house inhales you. Somewhere a girl of 14 inhales too, and counts her ribs and wonders which ones she can spare to fashion's hunger. Somewhere a woman loosens her laces in the dark and takes a breath so full she nearly weeps from the luxury of oxygen. Somewhere a doctor sharpens his words and is called impolite. Somewhere the Rational Dress Society prints more pamphlets in a room that smells like ink and defiance. And here, now you walk into your own day, waist conquered, shoulders steady, face made of compromises and carmine, and you carry in the shallow sea of your breath a tide that might very slowly wear down cliffs. You are beautiful. They will say, you are brave. You will one day answer. The table is a painting of domestic competence. Toast racked like little shingles. Eggs shining with a gloss a cook earns by knowing when to stop. Kippers curled as if they swam to the plate and died of good manners. Steam ghosts off the tea. The silver knows its job and reflects you flatteringly in small curved lies. Everything is right except the person supposed to enjoy it. You sit, which is to say you perch, 2 vertebrae from the edge. The bustle negotiated with a series of tiny calculations. One hand on the table to lower yourself, as if gravity charges by the use. The corset finds new ways to introduce itself to your organs with every angle. It is an inventor. Here a pinch that feels like a thought you can't remember. There a pressure like a hand placed on a book you'd like to read. Your husband rustles his newspaper. The sound is a curtain in a theater he believes belongs to him. He comments on a minister's speech as if this were a discussion rather than a monologue delivered to a wife-shaped audience. He taps the column with a teaspoon as if to stir the country. The club tonight, he says. Business. It is a single word with the gravitational pull of a planet. Business justifies absences, excuses late nights, perfumes the air around the lipstick on his handkerchief that both of you have agreed was a trick of the light. Business means you will be performing your own job without witness, the long, soft management of everything people refuse to call work because it is done by women. You nod. Nodding is the language of lubrication. It keeps households from squeaking in ways that attract attention. You try a bite of toast. Your stomach receives it like a visitor when the rooms are already full. You chew politely, sip tea through the straw of your breath, and plan a day that has already been planned for you. Tomorrow, he says, the Hendersons, wear the blue. You do not say that the blue is an argument your ribs lose. You do not say that your lungs ration air like a besieged city when you wear it. You say, of course. He folds the newspaper carefully, the way a man folds a certainty, and slips it into his pocket. He stands, checking his waistcoat as if success lives there. His kiss brushes your coiffure and not you. I'll be late. Be safe, you say, because be good would make this breakfast into a different story, and neither of you is prepared to be in that book. After he leaves, the room exhales. You do too, as much as the bindings allow. The quiet is not empty. It is packed with tasks that line up like little soldiers in your mind. A good house is an orchestra, and you must conduct without ever being seen to wave your hands. Agnes appears with the air of someone who has viewed the weather and dressed for it. Cook asks about the fish, she says. Translation. The salmon delivered is a tired poem. You must reassign the stanza. And the range. She needn't finish. The kitchen range is a sensitive artist who resents mornings. The parlor curtains, there's a mark. Just here. She shows you with a gloved finger as if you could fail to see once she points. You follow her through the house, the way a general follows a trusted lieutenant along a battlefield he knows from maps and rumors. The kitchen greets you with a wall of heat and a smell you catalogue without thought. Butter behaving, tea just at scream, coal not yet convinced. Cook lifts her chin in greeting, eyes wary because the quality of fish has become a referendum on her virtue. The salmon, you say, looking as if you've been peering into rivers all your life. The gills do not sing the song you want. Send the boy to market for a better one. Pay extra if you must. You say it kindly. You are careful to be kind, because precision in cruelty is easy. Precision in generosity is art. Upstairs the parlor waits to be judged and forgiven. The mark on the curtain is nearly nothing, an accidental brush of life, but you can already see Mrs. Henderson's finger traveling to it like a needle finding north. Down, you say to the maid with her mending basket. Off the rods. We shall wash and dry by the fire. Take the other pair as well so the room doesn't look lopsided. Housekeeping is geometry under a velvet cloth. The angles must be invisible. On your way back to your study, the doorbell trembles the floorboards. A delivery. Your new hat, an aviary masquerading as a halo. The milliner's assistant simpers, draws the lid off the bandbox like a conjurer revealing an inconvenient truth. The small bodies of birds translated into decoration. Genuine hummingbirds, she says with a smile that has nothing to do with jungles emptied of darting color. She produces the foot-long hatpin like a sword you are supposed to pretend is a sewing tool. She has a speech about fashion's demands and the superior quality of her employer's conscience. You let her deliver it. You sign the receipt. Your signature looks obedient because it must. After she leaves, you hold the hat and feel the history in it. Not just the lives stitched into the brim, but the women who will duck doorways and wear headaches to satisfy a silhouette fine as a lie. Fashion is always a collection of costs men don't pay. You carry the hat to the dressing room and put it on the stand with the respect you reserve for things that could impale you if they slipped. Your reflection accepts the gift with a small, practiced, unkind pleasure. You look correct. A correct woman is a safe woman. Safe women are the grout in society's tiles, noticed only when absent. On the desk, the pamphlet winks, a flirtation you're not supposed to engage. The Rational Dress Society. The phrase itself breathes, rational, as if choices could be a science and not a surrender. You pick it up and skim. Lines about health and drapery and the way skirts could be liberating if made for legs rather than against them. There is a little woodcut of a divided skirt that would let a woman walk like a sentence that has decided not to end in a blush. You hear your mother in your head, unwomanly, as if adjectives had skeleton keys that lock futures. You hear Elizabeth's laugh. Men can't decide whether to lace us or save us, because jokes are the scaffolding we build when we cannot yet build the house. The Belladonna touches the light and turns it down to kindness. Words fuzz at the edges, but the pamphlet sentences still make it through. You tuck it beneath a blotter as footsteps approach, because the line between brave and foolish is thin as a stocking and twice as easy to ladder. Ma'am, Mrs. Peters, the housekeeper, appears at your door in a skirt that means business. The chimney sweep can't come till Thursday. You do not sigh. You arrange your face into the expression of a woman for whom problems are invitations to demonstrate grace. Send for Mr. Hargreaves. He does emergency calls and charges like a thief. Let him. She nods, relieved to be given authority, and leaves with a purpose your husband would call masculine if he saw it. He does not see it. The work of women is done in rooms he visits without noticing the voltage. A note from your mother arrives, her hand as tidy as her criticism. She reminds you about the arsenic wafers with the insistent piety of someone who believes beauty is a tithe you pay to be loved. She calls them complexion insurance. You set the note under a paperweight and decide not to read it again. The way you decide not to wear the heavy pearls at breakfast, because sometimes not doing a thing is a revolution hidden under your cuff. By midday, the house has been tuned a half step down from disaster. The kitchen breathes cleaner. The curtains are off the rod, then back again, innocent as angels washed for Sunday. The replacement salmon arrives with the dignity of a fish that will be praised in two households before it is forgotten by both. You eat nothing but the corner of a biscuit because your corset has its own religion. You feed instead on the small charge of competence that comes from preventing a meltdown no one will notice. This is the secret economy of wives. Solve everything and be praised for. Creating nothing, the afternoon is a corridor of errands threaded between a parade of how lovelies, and of courses written in a hand that must not reveal its writer's mood. You order flowers from the florist who understands that lilies are a message and roses a novel. You choose cream napery with embroidery that implies money without shouting it. You approve the polishing of silver that reflects faces like pond water. You look at the clock and do the arithmetic that sits behind all your arithmetic. How many breaths it will take to get to the next chair. How many stairs before you can feign an errand that lets you stand very still. A maid hovers in the doorway with a face that says there is a human problem, not a housekeeping one. If you please, ma'am, Sally. The kitchen maid, young, freckled, trying not to exist and failing. She's coughing again. Consumption is a rumor in every house, coughs that argue and lungs that lose. Charity and prudence arm wrestle in your mind. Send her to the infirmary, you say finally, with a note. You add coins to the note, as if money could argue with disease. You will have to find a way to cover her work without making the girls who remain feel like furniture, move to make space for a new chair. When you finally retreat to your room for the half hour, a day that belongs nominally to you, the corset feels like a third person. Agnes sets a chair near the window and you sit, the slow, careful sit that looks like an etiquette lesson. She brings your tea, a leafier blend you favor when the Belladonna has turned the afternoon into a watercolor. Lady Russell? You ask. Better. They loosened her, Agnes says. It is a sentence with a world inside it, Doctor said. She stops at the remembered impoliteness of a physician who tells the truth too loudly. Doctor said it's a wonder any lady breathes. Perhaps that's why we faint, you say. And both of you smile in the brittle way people do when a joke is a pressure valve. Agnes looks at your face, at the pallor bought with powder, and the pupils bought with poison. You'll pass on the wafers? She asks, bold with the safety of an answer she already knows. I will. You wrap your hands around the cup as if heat could be stored for later, but I'll wear the blue tomorrow. We'll manage it, she says, and the we in her sentence is the only thing that makes the prospect bearable. You are about to answer when a small blast of childhood enters the room. Emma, the young one, skids to a stop at the sight of your dress and narrows her brown eyes with the sincerity of 7. Mama, your middle looks wrong. Out of the mouths of daughters, the unlicensed truth. You glance at Agnes, who wears that expression, all women. Learn, the one that means we will. Teach her grace without teaching her to lie. Think of the day when Emma will trade smocks for stays and how you can postpone it without making her a spectacle in rooms that eat girls who don't know the choreography. It's a special dress, you tell Emma. And even as you speak, you know that one day you will have to find words that are truer and braver. For important guests. Are we important? She asks, head tipped, tiny finger poking experimentally at the silk ridge of your busk. Very, you say, and mean it. And feel the corset's offense at laughter when you chuckle and pull her into the narrow avenue your arms and bodice allow for an embrace. You cannot lift her the way you used to. The dress does not permit joy that leaves the floor. She notices. Children notice everything except how not to mention it. When she goes, a little whirl of questions and crumbs. You look at Agnes, and the look says everything. That you are tired of carrying the furniture of beauty while men sit on it. That you are welding your patience to hope with spit and thread. That the pamphlet in your desk is not a piece of paper, but a door. Ma'am, Agnes says softly, an usher into the evening ahead. Shall we begin? You stand. The dress stands with you. The stays hold you like a sentence you cannot yet rewrite. You straighten the blue ribbon at the corset's top edge, the little flourish that tries to soften the fact of restraint. And you tell yourself a story, that women are an ocean, and cliffs are patient only until waves learn to count. You take a breath, small, careful, charged with the interest of all the breaths you are owed, and you go to rehearse the performance that keeps your life from falling on your head. By afternoon, the house hums a note only you can hear. It is the pitch of 100 solved problems vibrating in sympathetic relief. From upstairs, it looks effortless, the way a swan looks like ballet while its feet riot under the surface. You are the riot. You are also the applause that must never be audible. You begin with lists, not the ones in your head. That ledger is bottomless, but the ones you can put your hand on. Men respect paper more than miracles. The Hendersons require a menu that reads prosperous without whispering nouveau. Duck with cherry sauce says we have taste and access to fruit out of season. It does not say we are auditioning for royalty. A Charlotte Russe says the cook can court gelatin without scandal. You pencil in courses like chess moves, and then go to the kitchen to make your suggestions sound like the staff's excellent ideas. Cherry sauce? Cook asks, the corner of her mouth working in that small way experienced women have when they test you. Not orange. Cherries, you say. Let Mrs. Henderson think of gardens rather than ships. You want her to believe your household is the sort that produces fruit by charm. From the kitchen you pass through the still room, where jars line the shelves like obedient planets waiting to be named. You think about all the domestic sciences women master that the world refuses to call science. Sugar's temper, vinegar's moods, yeast's calendar. The scullery maid looks up from a drift of dishes, cheeks raw from the sink's winter. Her hands are a map of a life no one will read. Hot water, you tell her, a luxury since the range sulks, but not scalding. And you ask her name because people shape themselves differently when named. Lottie, she says, surprised into smiling. In that smile you glimpse small rebellions, for herself perhaps later, or for a daughter. You file the thought away as if it were a recipe. You may need it. On to the parlor, where the new curtains hang as if they were always innocent. The carpet has been coaxed into obedience by a brush and a prayer. You adjust a chair half an inch, and the room stops arguing with itself. It is ridiculous, the half inch, and yet you have learned that comfort for guests sometimes lives there. Fire, Mrs. Peters, you say, an hour before. Not blazing, a conversation of flames. She nods, understanding the poetry of degrees. The drawing room should be warmer than the dining room, and both should disagree only slightly with the hallway. Comfort is not a temperature. It is a gradient. You walk the house like a captain walking a deck, hand on the banister that will control your descent rather than comfort it. The corset makes you a narrower person, but it also makes you angular in your dealings. You will not tolerate laziness of thought any more than your stays tolerate softness of flesh. The blue of your dress speaks money, and the firm set of your mouth speaks competence. Men miss this fluency. Women read it to each other without moving their lips. In your study, the accounts lie in ambush. You adore and despise them. They are the only place in your life where numbers bow. Pounds and shillings. The coal merchant who sells you smoke as if it were heat. The butcher with his artistry of trimming, charging meat for his own virtuosity. You mark a short delivery with the small fury of someone who cannot display anger anywhere else. You add an extra penny to a maid's pay because you saw the way she set the table, recognizing that undersaucer is the difference between grace and almost. This is politics too, even if no one will ever elect you to it. Agnes slips in like a reasonable thought. A note from your mother, ma'am. The paper smells faintly of violets and rules. Your mother writes as if advice were the tax on being born to her. She reminds you again of Dr. Campbell's wafers, the way a person recommends prayer after a cough. Your throat tightens with the kind of rebellion that rarely makes it to your mouth. You let the note sit next to the pamphlet as if they are two women at the same luncheon who will pretend not to see one another. Also, Agnes says, a cousin's message for you. She produces a card with an address in Bloomsbury, written in an excited hand. The Rational Dress Society meets Thursday at 3. If you are interested in liberation of the lung and leg. You read it twice, because seeing yourself invited to your own freedom is something you don't want to trust. The room tilts a degree toward possibility. Thursday afternoon, you say. I'm engaged. You choose the word carefully. With the hospital committee. Agnes's smile is small and exactly the size of the risk. I'll arrange the carriage, ma'am. The bell in the hallway chimes a modest emergency. A maid at the door. Another house's distress carried like a folded letter. Lady Russell has collapsed again. Corseted for a garden party in the way people garden in paintings rather than on earth. They're sending for the doctor. Her husband is... The maid's eyes flicker, translating rage into etiquette. Agitated. Agnes, you say, go. And take. You hesitate, then stop hesitating. Take the pamphlet. It feels like passing a flask in a dry county. The maid doesn't look at it, which is how people look at contraband in polite houses. Agnes folds it into her pocket with the ease of a woman who has started to carry a weapon and learned to stand differently because of it. You return to the accounts. Numbers behave better than lungs. There is satisfaction here. The straightening of columns the way you once straightened pictures in your mother's house before you had words for your preference for level. You balance the ledger, and for a moment your brain is an engine that turns pain into order. By late afternoon, the house is primed. Flowers arrive and are coached into natural arrangements that took an hour to uncontrive. The silver candlesticks come out of their box like old friends who smell faintly of ambition. You choose the older pair, the ones with honest scratches that say, "We've been in the family," even if the family they were in belonged to someone else first. Emma, freckled, feral with a book's energy, drifts through, then doubles back. "Mama, why does Mrs. Henderson always run her finger on people's things?" "Because she doesn't trust surfaces," you say, and realize you've answered more than you meant to. "Because she doesn't know how to see the work without touching it." "Does Papa do that?" she asks, mischief lighting behind her eyes. "In his own way," you say, and at 7 she nods as if you have given her a map to a country she can't yet visit. You watch her leave, and the ache in your chest is not the corset. It is the wish to be for her what you did not have, a woman who whispers, "You deserve to breathe," while fastening the very hooks that guarantee one day she will have to learn to whisper it to herself. The light thins. Agnes returns, cheeks weathered by concern. "Lady Russell is recovered," she reports. "They loosened her. She does not bother to name the husband. Husbands in these stories are interchangeable furniture." "Disapproved. Of course he did," you murmur. "Fashion looks better when women are faint." You sit before the vanity the way a soldier sits before a mirror to straighten his uniform and not meet his own eyes. Agnes brings the curling tongs, hot enough to make hair forget it was once alive. Your scalp remembers other evenings, other little burns that scabbed into private topography. She is careful, the kind of careful that exists as a love language where love would be untoward to name. "They say there's a machine now," she offers, "for making the curls last." "The Nestler," you say, and smile a little, remembering a cartoon in Punch that made mockery out of a woman's singed patience. "I prefer not to be a technology trial." "Electric," Agnes adds, and there is a word that has begun to live in parlors. Electric as miracle, electric as menace. You imagine wires like veins in plaster, the invisible danger of convenience. Progress always arrives with a fine hat and muddy boots. She powders. She rouges. She does the small witchcraft of women, helping women survive the coven of respectability. When she lifts the Belladonna, you tilt your head, accept the sting, and accept that you are complicit in your own discomfort. Revolution is not a straight road. Sometimes it is a circle you walk while holding hands with yourself. Dressed, you practice smiling without showing that your teeth would like to bite. You stand, and the room stands with you because the room knows who oils its hinges. Agnes pins the outrageous hat. The pin slides in with a sound like certainty. "Perfect," she says. "Acceptable," you counter. "And this is the truth you can afford." Downstairs, your husband waits, dressed in the ease men inherit at birth. He glances up, does the inventory, dress, hair, willingness, and nods at the way a man nods to a waiter who got the order right. You feel the old version of yourself flicker, the one who once read that nod as sunlight. You do not resent her. You simply do not invite her to speak. "How do we feel?" he asks, as if your body were his club. "It is not cruelty. It is the air." "Quite well," you say, because the evening is not the place to stage a debate about what "well" means when a woman's organs are written in italics. You step into the corridor together, a couple who look correct, who will be judged correct by people holding forks like gavels. And then the bell rings. Henderson's on the step with their daughters. The older practiced at composure, the younger already learning to sit like a problem solved by laces. The compliments flow, the price of the dress disguised as admiration, the little lies about how easily a woman lives inside armor. You accept it all the way a tree accepts the wind, by bending where you can and deciding secretly where you will not. Dinner is precision. You distribute guests and oxygen in equal measure. You keep conversation moving when it stutters on the rocks of politics no one permits you to speak about and the shoals of children you are responsible for but may not define. You notice Clara, young Henderson, swallowing air in little sips, her corset new and unforgiving. She picks at her food as if chewing will embarrass her lungs. "Would you like a moment?" You murmur when the soup cutlery has been exchanged for fish knives, your hand a bridge between the fiction and the body crossing it. "I'm perfectly," she begins in the script, and then the world inks itself darker at the edges of her eyes. You know the signs. You have fainted privately and publicly, and with indifferent carpets under you. She rises, then folds like an argument, discovering it is wrong. The room erupts in the way polite rooms erupt, quietly, efficiently, pretending to be surprised by a plot twist they anticipated at the first act's opening. Men step back the way cats do from puddles. Mrs. Henderson flutters. Your husband rings for assistance with the air of a man summoning more wine. Loosen her, you say to the maids, dropping the part of your voice that gets things done. Now, not in mixed. Mrs. Henderson's horror is a parlor trick. Her daughter is a bellows out of rhythm, and she is worried about music. Would you prefer she not breathe? You ask, and you see a flicker in the other woman's face, a tiny rebellion against the script she is paid in status to recite. She nods minutely, and the maids work in deft, respectful urgency. Stays give, air returns, color comes back in embarrassed dots. When Clara is propped and present, she whispers apologies to furniture and people alike. You press a card into her palm, casual as a crumb. A name, a dressmaker. A door that opens in a wall she doesn't yet know can be moved. The evening resumes, slightly dented. Your husband declares it a success when the door clicks satisfyingly behind the last compliment. Success is an animal he feeds. You clean its pen. You were rather dramatic, he says mildly, pouring himself a brandy measured in inches of future indulgence. Someone had to be, you answer. Equally mild, because this is not the battlefield either. He shrugs. And the shrug is a treaty. He will not ask you to be less competent. You will not ask him to notice what it costs. Upstairs at last, the blue unhooked, the busk unfastened, the laces undone. Those words are a gospel. Agnes loosens you with hands that understand prayer. The first free breath hurts. Liberty always does when it arrives after a long imprisonment. Your skin bears the day's punctuation. Red commas where bones insisted, little crescents where hooks kissed too hard, a bruise like a moon. Oh, ma'am, Agnes says, not performing pity, only witnessing. It is enough. The price of 19, you say, light as you can make it. Tomorrow we'll purchase 20. She smiles, complicit in the arithmetic of sanity. She readies your nightgown, plain and blessedly shaped like a body rather than a fantasy. In bed, ribs singing with the memory of steel, you stare at the ceiling and rehearse a future in your head. Thursday, 3 o'clock, Bloomsbury. A meeting, an invitation to a world where a woman's body is allowed to be a body. The thought is so enormous you fold it small and tuck it under your tongue like a lozenge to be nursed until you can bear to swallow. Your breathing finds its unforced rhythm, the metronome smashed and replaced with a bird. The house settles around you, ticking in its wooden bones, a machine you fed with an entire day of your life. In the dark, you picture your daughters walking into rooms that do not measure their worth in inches. You picture your mother, still corseted, still convinced that suffering is a proof of womanhood, and you forgive her as far as you can without lying. Somewhere a street lamp fails and a lamplighter swears. Somewhere a clerk casts up columns and invents a deficit to explain a feeling he cannot. Somewhere a printer stacks pamphlets and smiles. At the thought of hands like yours taking them into rooms like this, you turn to your side the way the health manual told you would be best, for ribs recovering from daytime tyranny. Tomorrow will ask everything of you again, and yet there is a slice of Thursday in your pocket and a seam along your life that has begun, quietly, to give. You sleep. Not because the world is good, but because the people who will change it have to rise early. Thursday arrives like a secret you've been hiding under your tongue. Sweet, a little dangerous, impossible to talk around for long. The morning is a theater of ordinary duties, performed with the extra care of someone who intends to commit a minor crime after luncheon and needs the alibi of perfection. You review the accounts with a brisk pen. You praise the Polish on the banister with measured gratitude. You correct a place setting by the width of a sigh. Your husband, tying his cravat with the casual mastery of a man for whom cloth is willing, mentions the hospital committee and nods, satisfied by the sound of it. Do try not to overtax yourself, he says, the phrase that makes worry look like control. You promise not to, which is true in a way he doesn't intend. You are tired of letting the world tax what is yours. Agnes lays out the least punitive corset you own. Still a corset. Yes, but cut with a mercy that feels like blasphemy in certain drawing rooms. You'll need your walking boots, she adds, and you catch the glimmer in her voice. The conspiracy pleases her. You are two women smuggling oxygen across a border no man can see. The carriage knocks patiently at the curb. London is a book being thumbed through by a giant. Pages of terraces and alleys, margins crammed with vendors, small spills of coal dust where the city's ink smudges. The air tastes of river and smoke and the ambitious damp that creeps into everything. You keep your hands folded, palms damp, as the wheels count out the streets to Bloomsbury. Mrs. Wilberforce's house is unremarkable to the untrained eye. Brick, lace at the windows, brass that has learned the language of Polish. No banner declares revolution within. The maid who opens the door has the composed expression of someone who is paid to witness history and keep it from staining the carpet. She takes your card as if it were a passport and admits you to a drawing room where the air buzzes. Not with Belladonna eyes or gossip's sugar, but with an energy that pricks the skin like first frost. There are perhaps 15 women gathered in loose constellations. Their clothes are a catalogue of possibility, some fully conventional, some with skirts a daring inch shorter than propriety's reflex, one or two wearing bodices that hint at a freedom of shoulder unheard of at Almack's. They sit and stand and lean in ways that say they own their spines. The first thing you notice is not how they look, but how they breathe. Their chests lift and fall like waves instead of teacups. "Welcome," says a woman whose presence organizes the room the way gravity organizes planets. She is introduced as Lady Harberton, and her smile is that particular aristocratic kindness which makes room without relinquishing ground. "We are pleased to see new faces. Please, make yourself at ease." Make yourself at ease. 3 words no one has spoken to you without irony in years. You sit. You make yourself at ease as far as your stays will allow. It feels like breaking a rule written in a language you never learned to read, but always obeyed. Conversations taper and recombine. A woman with intelligent eyes and a mischievous mouth approaches with a bundle of garments folded over her arm like contraband books. "Constance Wilde," she says, and there is the faintest curtsy of amusement at the weight her surname carries in certain circles. "May I show you our latest heresies?" "Heresies are precisely why I left the house," you answer, surprising yourself with the speed of your courage. And she laughs, the delighted sound of a person who collects moments when women surprise themselves. She lays the first garment across a chaise, a corset, unlike the ones that have bruised your lifetime. The lines are gentler. The busk doesn't leer. The straps, dear God, straps, suggest a redistribution of pressure from the waist to the shoulders. "We call it a health corset," Constance says, with apologies for the term. It does not promise miracles. It promises lungs. You touch the fabric with the careful fingers of someone who once stroked a caged bird through the wires. "May I?" "By all means." The room understands the ceremony of first contact. You stand, and Agnes, bless her, materializes out of the polite background like a guardian spirit. She has already unfastened your bodice, found the knot at your back, calculated how far she can loosen without announcing mutiny from the rooftops. Behind a Japanese screen painted with cranes, you perform a quiet sacrament, releasing, unhooking, forgiving. The new corset rises to meet you like a better idea. It is not soft. It is not a surrender. It is structure without spite. When Agnes draws the laces, there is still pressure. Yes, but it is a hand at the small of your back, rather than a fist around your ribs. When you breathe, out of habit, cautiously, you discover a frontier you had forgotten existed between shallow and deep. Air enters, it stays. Your vision does not sparkle at the edges the way pressed women's vision does. "How is it?" Constance asks from the safe side of the screen, her tone both eager and gentle, as if asking a bird for a song. "Like I've been living in a room with only windows painted on," you say, and hear your own voice change from the inside. Agnes's fingers find your buttons, and for once it does not feel like being closed. It feels like being completed. Back among the cranes, you face the room, and it faces you as if it has been waiting. There, Lady Harberton says, satisfaction and sympathy woven into one syllable. Now you can listen with your whole body. You do. The meeting is part salon, part workshop, part confessional. A schoolmistress speaks about her girls, sturdy, bright creatures who wilt by afternoon in their stays and choke if asked to recite after drill. A shop assistant describes the way male customers behave when a woman breathes like a person rather than sighing like furniture. An older lady, white hair unapologetically visible beneath a mercifully light bonnet, tells a story about the day she decided to shorten her petticoats an inch for the sake of not dragging London into her parlour, and the letters of concern she received for her soul's welfare. The room laughs, the kind of laughter that salts a wound to draw out the infection. Lady Harberton speaks about principles, health, comfort, beauty, not as enemies but as neighbours who can share a fence. We do not ask women to become men, she says, and you hear the weariness of answering that accusation 1,000 times. We ask that clothing be a servant to the life a woman leads, not a master she must obey at her peril. Heads nod, wives, widows, daughters, a seamstress whose fingers have probably stitched more longing into seams than most priests here in a lifetime. Constance unfolds her second heresy, a divided skirt so cunningly cut you have to hold it open to see its truth. For walking, for cycling, for being a person who occupies space in more than one plane, she says, and a murmur travels the room like a breeze. You think of your sister's country lanes, of the bicycle Helen described with an eagerness that made her look 10 years younger. You think of Emma's legs quick and sure, and your throat tightens with an emotion that doesn't have a name polite enough for the room. We have seen advances of a different sort, adds a physician's wife, a precise woman whose emotions attach themselves to facts on their way out of her mouth. Cases presented at hospital, fainting, yes, and the ghastly rearrangements within. Miscarriages, I regret to say. Constipation so severe a surgeon was summoned to a lady who had never lifted a coal scuttle, but had lifted fashion's expectations every morning for 20 years. Another murmur, sadder, angrier. Your hand drifts to your midriff, to the place your children once inhabited, and you have to swallow twice. There is talk, too, of the world beyond fabric, of the new current that runs not only through wires in walls, but through the way people talk about invention, as if domestication of electricity will domesticate risk. A woman from Kensington describes a neighbour's mishap with an electric table heater left pressed to a tablecloth, how quickly modern becomes ash when hubris hums through cord and socket. We must not exchange one tyranny for another, Lady Harberton says. If our clothing becomes sane while our houses become heedless, we have not won a victory. We have traded battlefields. Agnes listens in a posture you recognize as hunger, not for food, but for tools. The servants' world conducts its own meetings in quiet corners, trading methods that keep women alive and households from catastrophe. You think of her nights, loosening her own stays when no one looks, reading Revolution in stolen minutes, and you love her in the way a body loves breath. When the formalities soften into conversation, you find yourself seated beside a woman who introduces herself as Mrs. Marchmont, a barrister's widow with eyes the exact blue of English plums. Did you faint the first time? She asks, meaning the first time you tried to make the old gods happy with a new number on your tape. I did not, you say. I fixed myself to the bedpost like a saint to a pillar and pretended I was in Rome. She chuckles. Pilgrimage of a sort. She leans closer. My husband used to call me valiant, she confides. For an entire year, I mistook that for a compliment. You both laugh, the rueful sound of women who have come to prefer words like free and well and enough. There are practicalities, names of dressmakers who will cut for lungs instead of gossip, instructions for ordering discreetly so a husband's eyebrow need not do calisthenics, subtle strategies for introducing change to mothers who believe righteous suffering is the only inheritance worth leaving. You add a name to your reticule, a Mrs. Linton in Marylebone who can fit a girl for a kinder adolescence and do it so attractively that grandmothers think it their idea. You think of Ellen, your dutiful elder, sitting, never leaning, already learning that comfort is a moral failing. Hope pains you, which is how you know it's real. Tea arrives, proper tea, not the medicinal draught of your earlier lie. You take a cup and a biscuit, and the room expands to include the possibility that pleasure can occur in daylight without permission. Conversation turns to sport. Women rowing at dawn. Women walking in boots built for distance rather than drawing room travel. The rumor of a ladies' cycling club that meets on Saturday mornings and takes the parks as if they belong to them. They do, Constance says when someone says as much. And the room hums agreement before you leave. There is a moment that will fix itself in the album of your mind. Lady Harberton taking both your hands in hers and pressing them with a firmness that transmits not just warmth, but a mandate. We go at the pace that keeps you safe, she says, reading in your eyes the itinerary of a life that cannot take public scandal and remain uninjured. Small changes repeated are a siege. A siege, you repeat, and you are back in your own house, hearing the word business and translating it to complicity, hearing the phrase be presentable and translating it to make yourself smaller. If a siege is what you have, then you will be Patient Stone and Patient Rain both. On the ride home, London unspools again, but you see it differently. The lamplighter pausing at his post is not just a man with a pole. He is the hinge upon which a city changes from one kind of light to another. A girl hops a puddle without thinking. Her skirt swings and does not catch, and you bless her mother without knowing her name. Two lads fly past on bicycles like arguments for speed made flesh. You imagine, with a jolt, what it would be to be part of that sentence, rather than the punctuation that ends it. At home, the house receives you as it always does, with 1,000 small expectations dressed as welcome. You are on time for nothing, and yet somehow early for everything. Agnes helps you undress, and when the health corset comes off, she holds it briefly, reverently, as if acknowledging an object that changed the shape of a day. How did it feel? She asks, as if you haven't already told her with your whole body. Like something I will no longer apologize for, you say. And her grin is swift and unguarded, the grin of a woman who has seen her mistress acquire a weapon. There will be more meetings. There will be setbacks that pretend to be tragedies, and tragedies that society will laugh off as choices. There will be mornings when you reach for the arsenic bottle because your mother's voice has built a cathedral in your head, and afternoons when you remember the widowed Mrs. Marchmont's plum blue certainty and set it down. There will be a day, soon, when Ellen's training corset will be replaced by a cut that allows her lungs to say, "I am here," without whispering. That night at dinner, your husband observes, eyes narrowed in the calculation men reserve for cards and wives. You seem renewed. The word delights him because he thinks he is responsible for it. You allow the misunderstanding to sit between you like a sleeping dog. I saw a friend, you say, which is true if friend can be a room full of women and the future. He raises his glass. To whatever keeps you agreeable. He smiles to make it banter. You clink. You do not bridle. You know something he does not. Agreeable and obedient are not twins but cousins who barely speak. Later, in the quiet of your room, you take out a sheet of paper with an address in Marylebone and begin a letter that will change your daughter's posture and, perhaps, her life. You write carefully, the way one writes an order of battle. You ask for an appointment for my elder girl, and you add, "The garment must satisfy both my mother and her lungs." You are learning to phrase revolution in a language mothers understand. When you seal the letter, you do not feel brave. Brave is for cavalry charges and men in paintings. You feel precise. Precision, you have discovered, is a better friend than fearlessness. You undress. Agnes loosens. The ribs sing that now familiar song of release. You lie down. The mattress sighs. Outside, London ties up her hair one gas lamp at a time. The city's corset loosened as night undoes the day. Your breath performs its small miracle without coaching. Somewhere in Bloomsbury, pamphlets dry on a rack, the ink thinking about the hands it will darken. Somewhere in Marylebone, a seamstress counts pins and wonders if she will be paid on time, and decides to do the good work anyway. Somewhere a girl named Clara unfolds a card with a name on it and studies the curve of the letters. Like a prayer, you sleep with the certainty of a woman who has accepted an invitation to breathe. and intends to RSVP every day until someone learns how to write an invitation to run. Morning brings weather you can carry in your pocket, thin sun, a polite chill, the kind of London day that never quite decides to be anything. Your pocket also carries something else. Mrs. Linton's reply, folded so many times it has learned the shape of hope. I should be pleased to fit Miss Ellen for a garment that satisfies both appearance and respiration. The letter reads in a hand that doesn't simper. I find these two aims hardly enemies when pattern and purpose know each other. Today? Ellen asks, trying not to trip over eagerness. She stands before you with the deliberate poise of a girl who has been applauded for posture and therefore fears slouching will bankrupt her. She is beautiful the way healthy saplings are beautiful, straight, green, not yet convinced the hedge is their destiny. Agnes hovers in the doorway pretending to be interested in the hem of your walking skirt while listening with every inch of her capable body. This afternoon, you say, we'll call it a milliner's errand if Grandmama inquires. Ellen tries to look worldly. She is 14. Nothing on earth can make her worldly, but a smile fractures her composure. Thank you, she breathes, as if the very syllables could argue with the stays she currently wears. Agnes brings the least tyrannical corset in Ellen's drawer and laces it with the tenderness of a woman who understands the difference between teaching and taming. Only snug, she says when Ellen asks for proper. We've a fitting later and lungs must be present to provide opinions. Your day rearranges itself around the appointment. Domestic chess pieces moved so that you can spare the afternoon without turning the evening into a gauntlet. The fishmonger is warned, the laundress bribed, the housekeeper briefed as if a general, the cook placated with your rare, sincere compliment about the subtlety of yesterday's cherry sauce. Your husband is told you are going to the milliner. He looks up long enough to praise your good judgment in deferring to his mother's taste. She does love a proper brim, he says, wholly unaware that you have begun to move furniture within the house of his assumptions. The carriage to Marylebone clicks along streets that have known your wheels for years, but the destination makes them new. Ellen watches London as if the buildings might clap for her. Her gloved hand finds yours and squeezes once, not childlike, not performative, simply communicative. You squeeze back and think how much of mothering is conducted in such unremarked pressure codes. Mrs. Linton's shop is tidy without apology. The plate glass window holds nothing more scandalous than two dress forms wearing day bodices that are definitely pretty and quietly infused with reason. No decoy of feathers or ribbons distracts the passerby from the fact that the garments are built for people who intend to go somewhere. A bell tings the air when you enter. The room smells of soap, new fabric, and a faint metallic thread of pins. A girl of 16, apprentice by the look, needle-proud, glides forward. Good afternoon, she says, catching your name at once from your card with the sly swiftness of the practiced. Mrs. Linton is expecting you. She parts a curtain with a hand that has not yet learned to ache and ushers you into a private fitting room where the light is generous and the chairs are kind. Kind chairs matter. These do not conspire with skirts to make women feel decorative and helpless. Someone has thought about knees here. Mrs. Linton arrives with the outward calm of the truly competent. She is neither cowed by your dress nor excited by your custom. She is pleased, as a carpenter is pleased by a good piece of wood. Miss Ellen, she says, looking at your daughter rather than you, we shall take your counsel as well as your measure. Already she has earned your loyalty. Ellen glances at you, seeking a sign. You nod. Tell Mrs. Linton the truth, you say. A sentence your mother has never said to you in a fitting room. The training stays pinch, Ellen blurts, face flushing, and I cannot breathe deeply after mid-morning. If I sit back, I feel as if I have swallowed the busk, and when I eat... She stops, mortified. The world does not teach girls to talk about stomachs in mixed company, mixed here meaning someone other than a mirror. If you eat, Mrs. Linton corrects, expression impassive in a way that makes it safe for Ellen to be human. Bodies ought to be able to accept sustenance without negotiations. She takes out a measuring tape as a conductor lifts a baton. Arms up. Now, down. Shoulders relaxed. Let us see their natural argument. She measures, notes, measures again. Her thumbs press lightly at the edges of ribs, as if asking geometry for consent. Agnes stands to the side with a look you have learned to love. Attention without presumption. She is learning a pattern-maker's theatre from this woman. Later, in the servants' hall, such knowledge will travel like contraband that improves lives. I propose, Mrs. Linton says after a minute's arithmetic, a shoulder-bearing design that redistributes the enthusiasm of fashion. It will still shape, a sideways smile at Ellen, because we live in a country where shape is a language, and we must be bilingual. But it will not insist. Will it look? Ellen begins, then swallows hard and changes the ending of the sentence to something she is allowed to say. Acceptable? It will look like a young lady whose lungs were invited to the party, Mrs. Linton says. The apprentice, Annie, according to the thimble case on her wrist, brings out a mock-up in sturdy calico. Let us fit in toile, so the mistakes are made in fabric that does not cost anyone's daughter. Behind a screen, the small theatre of change begins. Hooks unfastened, laces loosed, the little sigh that is both shame and relief when the training stays come off. The new shape, lightly boned with straps that do not chew into flesh, comes on. Agnes laces deliberately, waiting for Ellen to say, enough, not yanking toward an ideal the girl cannot inhabit. Walk, Mrs. Linton instructs when Ellen emerges, stilling her own expression so Ellen can read only her own body. The girl takes 3 cautious steps, then 3 more that are herself. She breathes. It happens so naturally she startles, as if she has lived beside a stream all her life and only now noticed the sound. How does it feel? You ask, unnecessarily, because the answer is in her eyes. Like I could run, she says, and the word runs so quickly to your throat it hurts behind your nose. Ellen laughs at herself, at the foolishness of the image, the rightness of it, and then moves as if to test the garment's loyalty. Sitting fully back in the kind chair, lifting her arms to reach for nothing, simply to lift. Bending to pick up a hairpin she accidentally drops. No gasp, no white spots at the edges of her vision, no reflexive hand to course its top edge to plea for mercy. You can't stop watching. You are greedy for every inch of your daughter's comfort. Now the mirror, Mrs. Linton says, because women are allowed to be pleased with how they look while also insisting on how they feel. Ellen turns. The silhouette is recognizably fashionable, which means your mother can be lied to without anyone actually lying. The waist is a curve rather than a threat. The shoulders read as shoulders instead of coat hooks. The bodice, when laid over the new stays, sits naturally rather than as a smile made with too many teeth. We will cut it with a touch more room along the floating ribs. Mrs. Linton muses, pinching calico and reaching for chalk. Those bones are not meant to be press-ganged. And a busk that does not pretend to be a sword. There, she pins, the sternum prefers harmony to heroism. Annie steps in and out with pins, mute and luminous with the pride of doing work that will change a person's day. She and Agnes exchange glances like workers passing tools over a fence they did not build, but have decided to tunnel under. We'll have a second fitting in 3 days, Mrs. Linton says, and delivery within the fortnight. You make a calculation involving the Hendersons' cousin's supper, your mother's inevitable inspection, and what can be hidden beneath a dress that satisfies the male eye at 6 paces. If necessary, she adds, reading your mind the way only women steeped in compromise can, I can disguise reinforcement so thoroughly that a mother thinks she sees severity where there is merely sense. You pay the deposit, and because your life has taught you to carry cash for the moments when you wish to expedite benevolence, you press additional coins into Annie's hand for thread, which both of you understand means for food. On the way out, Mrs. Linton pauses you with a question that is almost a benediction. And for you, madam, shall we plan a second for daily wear? The first taste of air can make the afternoon seem unfair. You hesitate, old lessons squaring their shoulders. Yes, you say, surprising the ghost of your mother so loudly you can hear her rattle in her frame. Yes, please, something that can pass in any drawing room and survive on any staircase. Back in the carriage, Ellen is buoyant and trying not to seem so. Will Grandmama notice? She asks. If she does, you say, she will not admit to noticing because that would require giving change a name. You both grin. You imagine your mother, who believes suffering is the scaffolding under every proper life, peering at her granddaughter and failing to spot rebellion because it has been expertly cut on the bias. Agnes sits across from you, the corners of her mouth working to contain words. Ma'am, she says finally, might I, at some point, for yourself? You ask, not making her crawl to the point. Yes, we'll have Mrs. Linton cut for you. You have never bought your maid a corset before. You consider all the things you have bought without thinking, flowers to soothe a woman likely to insult you anyway, a hat to appease a man's notion of your youth, and are quietly ashamed it did not occur to you sooner to purchase breath for the person who fastens yours each morning. Agnes's thanks are not verbal. They are in the way her shoulders drop from their habitual position, half an inch below stress. The afternoon's return march through London is ordinary and entirely altered. You pass a cluster of schoolgirls taking squeaking little steps because their uniforms demand it, and you want to stop the carriage and hand out address cards like rations. You pass a nursemaid pushing a pram, walking efficiently in a dress that has very likely been cleverly let at the seams by another maid who knows how to prioritize oxygen. You see women everywhere and cannot unsee their ribs. At home, your mother awaits in the drawing room, a domestic checkpoint you prepared for. She is the kind of handsome that refuses to acknowledge the bill. New hat? She asks at once, and you hand over a modest brim from the milliner's shop next door to Mrs. Linton's, a decoy purchase you intend to like. Better, she pronounces, which in your mother's dialect means adequate to sit on my head without embarrassing mine. Her eyes slide to Ellen. They see what they expect. A girl of correct carriage, gilded by filial obedience. Stand straight, Grandmama says by reflex. I am, Ellen answers, and you hear it, the absence of strain behind the words. Your mother nods, content to have shaped another generation's spine with a single command. After tea, delicate, laced with minor criticisms, you and Agnes retreat to your sitting room where policies can be drafted behind embroidery. Agnes takes up your hairbrush. Will she notice later? She asks softly. She'll notice when Ellen does not faint at evensong, you say, and she will attribute the miracle to prayer. The evening is a rehearsal for the life you intend. Ellen in her training corset that now trains her to be comfortable. You in the new health corset ordered for yourself under a dress you have worn for 2 seasons, but suddenly like more, because it allows your lungs to occupy it. At dinner, your husband observes what men observe, effects without causes. Ellen looks fresh, he says approvingly, a little less wan. You put butter on his praise and slide it across the table to your daughter. Thank you. Papa, she says, not tilting from the waist to lean forward because she can't, but because she doesn't need to later. He reads aloud from the paper a column about a gentleman in Kensington who has installed electric wiring in his house and now boasts that his dinners are lit by science. We mustn't be left behind, he muses, swirling his wine, a man dreaming of switches. Imagine, no more trimming wicks, no gas smell. You imagine something else, unfamiliar chords, enthusiastic currents, servants taught to fear what they cannot see. You make a note in your mind that progress is a creature you must feed with both hands and keep from biting the children. Bedtime produces its usual choreography. Agnes unhooks and unthreads, mercy embodied. Ellen stops by, hair down, face scrubbed honestly pink. She leans against the door, as children do when they don't want to reveal how badly they want to be touched. Mother, she says, may I? When it's finished, show Emma. Emma is 7 and suspicious of adulthood. An endorsement from Ellen will be a river cutting a new channel. Of course, you say. We will show her what a girl looks like when clothes are a friend. When Ellen leaves, Agnes closes the door and lowers her voice. Thank you for the corset, she says, not looking at you. I confess, sometimes I loosen mine when the hallway is empty, and I can hear myself breathe from 3 rooms away. I know, you say, and both of you smile at the strange comfort of being known by someone paid to keep your secrets. In the quiet that follows, you think of the countless inches of fabric, of lacing, of patience that bind women to days. You have loosened one. It seems small until you picture your daughter, 19, 20, 30, standing up from a dinner table without blooming grey around the edges, laughing without wincing, carrying a child without praying to be allowed to inhale. The thought opens a window you did not know was nailed shut. You blow out the lamp, hear the soft complaint of your mattress, feel the familiar ache subside into a background hum. Your body always forgets to miss until it returns. If you could send one letter back to your younger self, it would say, "You are allowed to be comfortable." If you could send one forward to your granddaughter, it would say, "May you never need permission." Down the hall, you can hear Ellen settling. Boards creak. A cough that is a habit more than a need, then silence. You picture the calico mock-up on Mrs. Linton's stand, pinned and chalked, a map to a country where a girl's ribs are not colonized. In Marylebone, Annie will be sweeping the floor, the day's pins found and counted, her own stays loosened on the walk home by a quarter-inch she has newly decided she deserves. Somewhere in Bloomsbury, the rational dress women will be writing copy for the next pamphlet, something about health without hysteria, a phrase that will be mocked by men with jokes about bicycling and ovaries, and cherished by girls like yours who will memorize it the way people memorize directions to a refuge. You fall asleep with a professional woman's calendar in your head. Fittings, meals, the endless maintenance of reputation, and a private woman's victory singing under it. Your daughter's breath stretching into her body like morning light. Tomorrow there will be dust, menus, social arithmetic, and arguments about hats. But tonight you have purchased air, and the receipt is written in your child's face. Outside, London lies on her back, counting chimneys. Inside, in the warm dark, you promise your bones that you will continue the siege, brick by brick, breath by breath, until comfort is an inheritance and not a scandal. The morning the electrician comes to estimate the cost of dragging lightning into your walls, the sky performs the appropriate theatrics, low clouds bruised with promise, a grumble somewhere over the river, air that smells like pennies. Your husband is radiant with the energy of a man about to purchase modernity. He has been traded on by a friend at the club whose dining room simply glows, and who claims that fillies of sole taste more civilized under electric light. You want to point out that civilized fish do not swim toward light, but some jokes are too expensive to make. "Think of it," he says over coffee, tapping ash into the fireplace as if it owes him rent. "No more trimming wicks. No more gas turned too high when cook gets flustered. A switch, Margaret. You touch it and the room obeys. A switch. A room obeying. You file this under things men say when they have not spent their lives coaxing obedience out of rooms that prefer to behave like weather. Still, you do not dismiss electricity as only his vanity. You have heard the stories too. The gas leaks ignited by careless matches, the headaches the lamps give, the way velvet curtains sip flame given the slightest excuse. New dangers do not make old dangers romantic. The electrician arrives with a coil of wire over his shoulder like a serpent he has charmed, and a tape measure that flicks out and sighs back in with a sound you have lately learned to love in a dressmaker's hand. He is practical, underimpressed by your husband's enthusiasm, over-concerned with beams and plaster thickness. You like him at once. He smells faintly of singed hair and soap. "We'll run the main feed from the alley," he says, eyes on the crown molding as if reading a text written in dust. Up through the scullery, behind the pantry, then into the walls. Switches here and here. His pencil ticks lightly against the wallpaper where your grandmother's mirror hangs. "You'll want to move that while we open up, madam." "Open up," you repeat, picturing the house as a patient who has already endured corsets and now must submit to surgeons. He nods. A bit of plaster dust, a bit of inconvenience. His glance toward the kitchen is respectful. "Your staff will hate me for a week. Not if you teach as you go," you say. "And not if no one dies." He barks a laugh that ends in a cough. "We aim for neither death nor scandal." Your husband paces a little, the way boys do when they want a thing and are trying on gravitas to disguise it. "How soon could you begin?" "As soon as you stop having guests. The electrician answers with an honesty you find refreshing. You don't want power half in the house and half out while you're feeding important people. He nods toward the dining room. I've seen that dinner. Candles sputtering, wires dangling like ivy, the lady of the house smiling like a burning fuse. Best avoid it. You meet his eye. I've hosted that dinner, you say, and he grins. Solidarity passing briefly between a woman who runs a stage and a man who constructs its trapdoor. You settle on a date. 2 weeks hence, when your social calendar is only spotted with obligations rather than slashed by them. In the interval you read. Pamphlets arrive at houses for many reasons, not all of them dress reform. You consume articles with diagrams that look almost playful, arrows and boxes, and the cheerful insistence of early science. Current flows from here to there. Switches sit like dignified gatekeepers. Bulbs glow like domesticated suns. The tone is always delight with a small footnote of caution you can hear, even when it is not printed. Dry hands. One piece advises. Never pull a plug by its cord, says another. Inspect for fray. You picture Sally's quick hands, Lottie's raw knuckles, Agnes's competence, and you draft your own pamphlet for the servants' hall, obvious to the educated, life-saving to the tired. Agnes will pin it near the tea caddy, the way you pin recipes for puddings to be attempted on calmer Tuesdays. In the middle of your reading, Clara Henderson's card arrives, an embossed confession. She has written in a careful hand, "Might I call? I would be obliged for the name you pressed on me." The euphemism makes you smile. We pass contraband as niceties. Your husband frowns at the card as if the young lady had fainted on your carpet and left a stain. Tomorrow at 11, you say, not asking whether he will be home. You already know. Clara appears looking like a girl who has made it across a field patrolled by chaperones. She's polite to excess, almost apologetic for her lungs, and obviously terrified of her mother's ear. You settle her with tea and a shortbread no one would call indulgent aloud. You needn't apologize for wanting to breathe, you tell her, voice light, because you have learned that some truths resist gravity. If men were fainting over soup, we would call it a national crisis. She laughs, startled and grateful, and then opens like a hand. Mother says it's a weakness I must conquer. Her eyes slide away. But I'm so tired, and the headaches. Her voice dwindles, ashamed of pain. You place the dressmaker's card on the table between you, the way men place shillings. The woman who cut my daughter's new stays is discreet and clever, you say. She can make a garment your mother will praise for severity that is, in fact, sanity. You pause, and if you need a place to rest that is not the floor, you may use the blue velvet sofa in the back parlor any afternoon you wish. I will have Agnes bring lemonade and pretend we are discussing buttonholes. Clara's eyes fill. Do you really? She doesn't finish because finishing would make the request official and therefore scandalous. I do, you say, and you mean it the way a general means go. When she leaves, Agnes appears with a tray you did not ask for, habit and kindness braided. I'll tell cook to keep lemon on hand, she says, translating conspiracy into logistics. And I'll speak to Mrs. Linton about a fitting that looks like a hat consultation should Mrs. Henderson insist on attending. You want to hug her. Instead, you say thank you in the register women use when they mean, you are why some of us survive. The health corset you ordered for yourself arrives in the same post as a note from your sister about cycling in the country next month, if you dare. You try the new stays on while the house is briefly empty, and there it is again. That astonishing ordinariness of lungs doing their job without filing a complaint. You fasten your gown over it and stand before the mirror, braced for the betrayal of a silhouette that will cost you socially. The mirror does not betray you. If anything, you look more yourself, less clenched at the mouth, more present behind the eyes. It is remarkable what happens to a woman's face when she is not solving the problem of drawing breath. The following week is a seesaw of old and new. Ellen's second fitting, euphoric. Your mother's luncheon, punctuated by her remark that girls these days lack firmness, which you allow to sail past. A charity meeting at which a splendidly narrow-waisted woman collapses during a vote on coal rations. You loosen her and are thanked later by the chair, quietly, like an apology not owed to you. Your husband's mounting monologues about switches. At night, you and Agnes practice with the few electrical demonstrations the electrician sent round for education. A simple battery and bulb that glows like a secret. A bit of wire with a charred spot, to show you what fray looks like. You forbid the girls from touching the apparatus without supervision and then allow them to touch it under yours. Emma's eyes widen the way a child's eyes widen at the circus. Ellen, halfway between child and woman, narrows hers with interest. "It's like fashion," she says suddenly, making you almost spill your tea. "We force it to do what we want, and then we pretend it's harmless." "It isn't harmless," you say, and you mean both things. On the appointed Monday, the electricians pour into your space like a regiment, tool belts, ladders, an air of cheer braced against the inevitabilities of dust and dismay. The house protests from the first hammer, plaster sneezing, beams offended, the echo of violation up the staircase. You spend the day on a stool not quite where you belong, intercepting chaos before it sits down to dinner. Agnes acts as translator between men who measure in inches and women who live in them. In the afternoon, one of the younger men, overconfident, damp-handed, reaches for a live wire too casually. The foreman swears with a piety that would impress nuns and raps the boy's knuckles with a screwdriver. "Dry hands. How many times?" he growls. "The jolt was minor, the lesson public. You make a note to include knuckle rapping in your house rules should electricity breed complacency." By evening, the dining room has acquired switches that resemble little ivory smiles. Innocent until you imagine the current behind them. The bulbs, when tested, bloom with a light that is not candle, not gas, a clarity that makes the silver look honest and your husband look instantly in love. He stands in the doorway like a man who has purchased a sunrise. "Remarkable," he says, and you do not disagree. It is remarkable. You can see to read at the far end of the table. The corners of the room no longer hoard shadows for mice and gossip. "Tomorrow we'll do the nursery," the foreman says, wiping his hands with a bit of rag that used to be a shirt. "Safer there than lamps, as you said, madam. If your girls know not to dangle ribbons near the fixtures." You think of Emma's enthusiasm, Ellen's caution, the way ribbons everywhere write their own tragedies. "We'll install proper shades," he adds as if reading your mind. "Won't be any danger if the switches are respected." That night you eat under electric light for the first time. The food looks prettier and crueler. You can see the blood in the roast and the way butter takes the shape of the knife. Your husband is beside himself with satisfaction, which makes him almost tender. "You look," he falters, startled by a thing he cannot place. "You look present." "Perhaps I am," you say, and raise your glass to the future as if it were a guest you intend to like but don't yet trust near the children. Trust, it turns out, is a problem for tomorrow. By midweek, smoke creeps along the kitchen ceiling like a rumor. Cook runs red-faced into the hall and then stops herself at the threshold of scandal, remembering what to scream. "Ma'am, if you please, the new kettle, something's wrong." In the scullery, the electric kettle, the salesman's miracle, is sulking. Its cord lies in a lazy curve that looks innocent until you notice the small teeth marks appearing where it meets the plug. Not teeth, heat, fray. The place where advice footnotes become emergency. Sally, pale and damp-handed, is standing near the sink, eyes wild. "Stop," you say, sharp enough to slice through panic. Hands dry. Everyone step back. Agnes arrives in that way she has of materializing exactly where needed. You grasp the switch with a hand you have dried against your skirt. Off. The kettle is silenced. The smell remains, a warning letter the house will keep on file. You pull the plug out by its body, not its wounded tail. "Rag," you say, and Agnes is already there, wrapping the cord so the kitchen will not trip over its own stupidity. "Who used it last?" you ask, and the kitchen looks at its toes. "I did," Sally whispers. Only my hands were wet. I was in a hurry." "Then we will not be," you reply. "Ever." You look at her face, at the youngness still clinging to the edges. "You are not a warning in a newspaper," you say. "Not in my house." That evening you stand the kettle up on a high shelf like a child that has misbehaved and draft your own rules to go beside it, writing as plainly as Mrs. Linton speaks. Dry hands, always. Inspect cords every morning. If you would not wear a stocking with such a ladder, do not plug in a cord with it either. No pulling by tails, grasp the plug, not the line. No wires near water unless you can afford to dance with God. The girls read, nod solemnly, and drift back to their real business, keeping you alive while pretending they simply help. Your husband calls it fuss, and you let him, because he will also call it foresight, should it save his dinner. The day after the kettle incident, Ellen brings Emma to your room with a seriousness usually reserved for funerals and secrets. "Mother," she says, "Emma has a question." Emma's eyes are bright in the way that precedes a revolutionary utterance. "You brace, will I have to wear the hard kind?" Emma blurts, hands planted on her small hips as if daring history to argue. "The hard kind of what?" you ask, though of course you know and are stalling for time to choose words that do not set traps in her future. "Corset," she says with the brutality of 7, like Ellen's old one, or like Grandmama's forever one. You look at Ellen, who looks back at you wearing a new authority. She has walked across a small bridge and is waving from the far side. "We are learning," you say at last, "to wear the kind that lets a person stand up straight without lying down inside." Emma holds your gaze as if testing whether the sentence is made of breath or hope. "You will wear what keeps you healthy," you add, "and accept that you have just declared a war you cannot fight alone." "Good," Emma says, and runs off to discover whether the nursery will glow today or tomorrow. Ellen lingers long enough to kiss your cheek, rare these days when she is trying on dignity like a dress, increasingly precious because of it. In quieter hours, you read in bed about the Rational Dress Society's planned exhibition, garments to be shown side by side, the tyrant and its kinder cousin, the feathered absurdities and the hats that do not require martial pins, Constance plans to lecture on the divided skirt and not apologize. Lady Harberton will speak about the angel of the house and why angels deserve lungs. You intend to go with Ellen if your mother can be lured to an appointment elsewhere, and with Agnes if the household can be coaxed into a day without you. Your husband brings you a clipping from the paper, as if to balance your enthusiasms with science he can endorse. "They're saying the new refrigerators will rid us of spoilage entirely," he crows. No more worrying over deliveries in the heat. You read the article and find, in the 6th paragraph where men stop, a mention of minor risks associated with the refrigerant, ammonia, methyl chloride, gases that have already visited your house in other guises, each with its own talent for trouble. You imagine the kitchen with a new humming box and write a mental list in the margin. Windows open, nose honest. Sally taught that sweet or sharp smells without cause are cause. Progress, you remind yourself again, lets itself in like a gentleman and brings cousins you did not invite. Late one night, when the house has relaxed into the vulnerable sounds that make you want to patrol it with a candle, you find yourself standing in the nursery doorway. The electrician has finished. The fixtures are shaded. The switches sit ready to be flicked by small, responsible hands. You do the flicking. Light arrives. Clear, immediate, almost indecent in its intimacy. Ellen's book spines step out of shadow. Emma's doll looks less haunted. The rug declares itself a field instead of a suspicious dark. You turn the switch again and darkness returns, suddenly kind. You stand there a minute and practice making day and night in a room where your children sleep. "What is it?" your husband murmurs from the bed when you return, sensing the difference in the air, just learning the new weather, you say. And he is satisfied because it sounds like housekeeping and not insurgency. When you sleep, your dreams braid the day's strands, wires threaded through your house like a second nervous system. Ellen walking through a park in a divided skirt that no one notices because the world has decided to look at something else. Agnes slipping out at dusk in her own new stays, shoulders relaxed in a way you have never seen. Clara Henderson laughing on your blue velvet sofa with a glass of lemonade, her mother nowhere in sight. Your mother standing at a mirror, frowning, then, miracle, lifting her own laces a quarter inch in the privacy of a room no one will ever call hers. In the morning, You wake to rain so fine it's almost administrative, London conducting its constant small maintenance. The house hums with its new organs. You dress in the health corset that has already begun to spoil you for martyrdom, and you pick up your pen. There are letters to write. To Constance about the exhibition. To Mrs. Linton about a second set of stays, Agnes's measurements enclosed. To your sister about bicycles and lanes. To Clara about courage in times of day when mothers nap. You pause before beginning and draw a long, unhurried breath. In a world of switches and laces, fraying cords and dangerous creams, this is the currency you most intend to hoard and spend wisely. Air in, air out, plans between. The wires in your walls crackle softly, contained. The sparks in your mind do not ask to be contained at all. They ask to be shared. Soon enough, you will oblige. The rational dress exhibition falls on a Saturday with weather that refuses to choose a side, sun and cloud arguing like siblings over a window seat. You choose your own seat in this argument. A carriage at 1:30, a hat that behaves, a dress that reads proper from the pavement and stubborn from the ribs in. Ellen is coming. Your mother dispatched on a visit to an old school friend whose conversation is so heavy with triumphs of housekeeping that even she will be too occupied to critique your day. Agnes accompanies you under the pretense of carrying packages. In truth, she is your field marshal. Her new stays are not yet finished. Mrs. Linton promises them Monday, but today's lacing is kind. And you can see it in the way Agnes's shoulder blades sit like calm birds. Remember, you tell Ellen as the carriage rattles toward Bloomsbury. We admire politely, we ask intelligent questions, and we do not offer ourselves for newspaper caricatures. She nods serious, cheeks bright with the kind of hope girls are told to keep hidden as if it were jewelry. The hall is already breathing when you arrive. Not crowded. This is not the Crystal Palace with its armies of men peering through monocles at machinery. But well attended, the way a sermon is when the preacher is rumored to be dangerous and kind. The air smells of starch, fresh paper, a hint of glue. Banners hang without swagger. Cream canvas lettered with black declarations that refuse to apologize for their consonants. Health, comfort, beauty. Your eyes sting for a moment, and you blame London's perpetual dust because it is easier than admitting the word beauty can be reclaimed from people who use it like a cudgel. Lady Harberton stands near the entrance, greeting women as if she were a hostess, and this merely an afternoon at home. Constance Wilde is further in, wrapped in a day dress with a line so honest that you suspect it will be treason to call it anything but flattering. When she spots you, she lifts 2 fingers in a salute that makes you feel recruited and paid. The exhibition begins with a tableau of ghosts. 3 mannequins dressed in the violences you grew up learning to decorate. One wears a tiny corset that looks like a bad joke until you read the placard. Training stays for a child. 9-12 years. Ellen's fingers press into your palm so hard you feel her future arguing with the past. The second mannequin wears a wedding bodice cut to demonstrate what fashion does to a sternum. The silk gleams like a lie told with a smile. The third stands under the weight of a gown hung with the dead, whole birds wired to a hat, feathered froth like a storm caught and bent into a crown. A small sign reads, "A lady is a wardrobe and a weapon. Beware which you choose." "I don't like this part," Ellen whispers. "You're not supposed to," you say. This is the before. The next room is the after, drawn with needles. Health corsets lie open like diagrams of mercy. Shoulder straps that distribute rather than punish, boning that guides rather than commands. Divided skirts hang on forms with little cards that do the rhetorical work of soothing grandmothers. Indistinguishable in motion, elegant at rest, safer in both. There are walking boots that do not pretend women will never walk, petticoats that gently refuse to be blankets, undergarments tailored with the same seriousness dressmakers reserve for the visible. You realize, with the surprise that comes when you discover something so obvious you cannot believe you missed it, that so much of women's suffering is caused by the indignity of tools designed to look fine on a chair rather than behave properly on a body. At a long table, a starchy-haired man, Dr. Havelock, according to the chalkboard, stands beside two white anatomical drawings. He speaks in a tone half lecture, half pastoral visit. "Observe the diaphragm," he says to a cluster that includes Ellen and a milliner with quills in her bun. He traces with a pointer the muscular bell that separates breath from the complicated stew below. Now imagine the gentleman's hand at a lady's waist, a few titters, replaced by a leather strap pulled to restraint. We do not improve morals by depriving lungs. We improve fainting couches. His smile is kind. I am paid to be dramatic, but I assure you these drawings are the least dramatic thing about this subject. Constance sweeps in with her divided skirts like a person who has never apologized for a sensible idea. "Who will mount a bicycle?" she asks, and the room laughs the nervous laugh of women who have been taught that the word mount belongs only to men and horses. Then, a woman in her 50s, plainly dressed and plainly done with the nonsense of fear, steps forward. "I used to climb trees," she says with a shrug, and accepts Constance's hand as if the centuries were a gate and she had a key. She balances, pushes, pedals, once, twice on a stationary frame placed on a mat, so no one can accuse her of disorder in motion. The room applauds like thunder politely located indoors. Ellen watches with her mouth a soft O. You can feel her abdomen trying the gesture of a laugh that would not pinch if she let it out. "You may, you know," you murmur. "Not here, but soon." She nods, then regains her careful face, the one that keeps adult women from issuing reminders about posture. Around a corner, mannequins in morning wear stand like ambassadors from a country where women run errands and return alive. A seamstress pins a sleeve on a live model who is doing her best not to fidget. And in that small dance of fingers and breath, you see the future of industry. Women making clothes for women with attention paid to how shirts meet shoulders, how seams travel over scapula, how movement is not an inconvenience but the reason fabric exists. Agnes is everywhere and nowhere, drinking everything in, carrying your reticule, memorizing small tricks with her eyes like a camera no man has yet invented. She pauses longest at a display of corset shields, thin bits of chamois designed to soften the bite where bone forgets it guards skin, not wages war against it. "Mrs. Linton can cut these," she murmurs to herself, filing the pattern home for later. Clara Henderson appears from behind a cluster of dresses, the color back in her face in defiance of her mother's insistence that pallor is the name of refinement. "I thought you might come," she says, and then catches herself glancing around as if someone might overhear the scandal of her hope. Today she's alone. The state of being unchaperoned makes her look taller. You draw her into your group without making ceremony of it. Ellen and Clara exchange shy nods, the electric moment when girls recognize one another, not by family introduction but by the tilt of their discomfort. Lady Harberton mounts a small platform near the end of the hall and the hum becomes a hush. "Thank you for coming," she begins, her voice carrying without hysteria. "Thank you for caring about the bodies we are charged with carrying." A few men dot the crowd, one with a notebook, one with a wife, one with an opinion he will save for the club because he has finally learned it's safer there. "We do not ask for ugliness," she says, hands folded lightly in front of her. "We do not propose sackcloth nor advocate slovenliness." Her smile tilts as if she has trodden on these accusations like loose boards 100 times. "We ask for beauty that does not cost blood. We ask for comfort that does not require permission. We ask to breathe. The applause is not wild. It is steady, blessedly steady, like rain on parched ground. Questions, answers. A woman from Bath, Ernest, asks how to face a mother-in-law who believes corsetry is scripture. "We start with underthings," Lady Harberton replies, as all reform does. "We begin where the eye does not indict. We smuggle health under propriety." A young journalist asks whether cycling will make wives ungovernable. Constance beams at him as if he is a cousin learning to count. "Good," she says. The room laughs, the laugh that says our patience is long, but not infinite. There is a display tucked almost out of sight. Cosmetics, labeled without scold. Lead whites with a skull drawn small at the corner. Arsenical wafers with a miniature hourglass. Belladonna drops with a little iris blooming sinisterly. Beside them, recipes for creams that do not burn, made of beeswax and rose water. You wait your turn to speak to the woman tending the table, a midwife with hands you'd trust to catch a future. Does anyone listen? You ask, more jaded than you mean to sound. Enough, she says. Enough to make me keep bringing the jars. She slides a paper toward you with a receipt in a hand like your grandmother's. Beeswax, almond oil, rose water, patience. Boil low, stir constantly. Apply to yourself the way you apply mercy to other women. You buy 2 pamphlets, one for you, one for your mother that you will not send until you have softened the edges of its truth with a letter in your own voice. You buy a pair of walking bootlaces woven with a bit of elastic. They feel like a new word, sliding into a sentence you have said wrong for years. You buy nothing you cannot defend, and everything you buy you can. As the afternoon loosens, you and Ellen and Agnes find a small bench near a window. Clara perches on the arm, improper, delicious, and lowers her voice. Mother thinks this is a passing fancy, she says. She believes in what lasts, narrow waists and narrow allowances. What lasts, you say, is breath. You look at Ellen. And daughters who remember their mothers did something about it. Clara studies the floor as if reading instructions. I made an appointment, she says, hope stitched into every syllable. Tuesday, Mrs. Linton. Bring a hat, Agnes advises, deadpan, and the girls laugh. The sound like lemonade in sun. On the way out, you pause at a small, lightly attended corner, the house modern, where a matronly woman in spectacles lectures gently about electricity. She has a model switchboard wired to bulbs and bells. Children press white buttons and squeal when light appears as if from thought. Dry hands, she repeats like a psalm. Respect cords, shade your bulbs, ventilate your refrigerator. She speaks the word refrigerator like an actress pronouncing a foreign nobleman's name. Respectful, wary. Listen to your nose. If something smells wrong, it is. You feel an almost physical gratitude to this sensible prophet. You drop a coin in her donations tin and she tips her head. Seeing you in that way, women who run houses see one another, with assessment that carries affection. Back home, the house recognizes you with a sigh and a question mark. You look tired, your husband says, and then amends, content. Tired and content. He kisses your cheek as if approving a purchase he cannot see. Was the milliner agreeable? Very, you say, and remove your hat like a person returning from a border with all her papers in order. He launches into a speech about a man at the club whose electric chandelier is the talk of the town, polished copper, leafed shades, a chain you pull like a bell rope. You make the appropriate sounds while your mind runs its fingers over the day. The strap that did not brutalize, the bicycle that did not buck, the girls who did not apologize for wanting to move. After dinner, Ellen spreads her pamphlets on the carpet as if mapping summer campaigns. Emma kneels beside her, small hands devout over the pictures. That one, Emma says, pointing at a divided skirt in a woodcut. When I am big. When you are big, you say, and the words do not feel like a lie. Later still, when the house ticks into its nighttime tempo and your husband snores like a man who believes ease is his due, you sit at your desk and compose 2 letters. The first, to Mrs. Linton, requires no flourishes. Thank you for today. My daughter stood up straight and did not wince. I would like to inquire about my maid's fitting as well. Her measure enclosed. The second is to your mother and is more difficult. You write, cross out, rewrite. You swaddle truth in filial respect and tie it with a ribbon of shared history. Dearest mother, you begin, you taught me to present myself with dignity. I am learning that dignity and breath are friends. There is an exhibition I think would interest your practical mind, women solving problems of dress the way you taught me to solve problems of dinner. You do not mention Belladonna. You do not mention arsenic. You do mention that Ellen looked fresh as a rose in June, a phrase chosen with strategic care. Your mother's heart is a garden of certain perennials. Praise in such vocabulary finds purchase there. You seal both letters and feel relief out of proportion to their weight. Through the door, You can hear Agnes moving the last of the day's commitments from one pile to another, so tomorrow will not begin under siege. You think of the seamstress's apprentice, Annie, catching a late supper in a kitchen that smells of onions and hope, perhaps unpinning a hair ribbon and loosening her own stays because she, too, visited the exhibition and dared to think about herself on the way home. Sundays have their own choreography. Yours begins next morning with church bells behaving like bells, then pews behaving like pews. Your mother appears triumphant to sit with you, her waist like a stern line, her scent faintly violet and insistence. Ellen, in her training corset cut for living and not gloating, kneels without the tiny gasp that used to precede her prayer. Your mother notices, of course she does, and whispers, "Better." See what discipline does? You smile the smile women inherited from Eve when she learned how to answer without arguing and keep a secret without lying. "Yes," you murmur, and file away the proof that revolution must often be mislabeled to pass inspection. After the sermon, a harmless homily, a hymn sung bravely flat, you step onto the church steps and the wind lifts your hat just enough to scold you. A woman behind you, Mrs. Pevensey, who polices propriety as if paid by the fine, remarks tartly about the dangers of modern hatpins. You turn, prepared to acknowledge and avoid. Before you can speak, an older man, Mr. Braithwaite, retired shipbuilder, notorious for nosing into other people's storms, taps his cane and says, "I've seen worse injuries from men's opinions." The corner of your mouth moves. So does Agnes's. Ellen blinks a new world into focus. You walk home, arms linked, three women lit by the mild victory of a day when nobody fainted and everybody learned something. In the window of a chemist, you pass a display of tins with ladies' faces painted so pale they look unwell. Beside it, a handwritten sign, perhaps sparked by the exhibition, perhaps by a memory, reads, "Rose water, beeswax cold cream, made fresh." You note it. You will go in tomorrow. You will make it yourself the day after. You will give a pot to Clara with a ribbon and a nudge. You will send one to your mother, wrapped in praise, tied to an invitation. That night, your house shines with its new lights like a sober galaxy. You switch them off one by one, as if knighting rooms back to darkness. In your bedroom, you loosen your own laces without apology and stand for a long minute simply breathing, air in, air out, like an animal that survived the winter and can smell spring far off. Coming stubbornly across fields, you are not naive. You know there will be weeks when the pamphlets go unread and the old corset is chosen for the sake of peace at dinner. You know there will be a letter from your mother that lands like a dart and draws old blood. You know men will write amusing things about women with divided skirts, and someone at the club will attempt to explain diaphragms in a way that makes you want to laugh, cry, and eat all at once. But you also know this. You have stood in a room with women who breathe and did not have to apologize for wanting to do the same. You have watched your daughter watch them. You have felt your maid memorize freedom with her eyes. Progress is not a parade. It's a seam ripped and resewn. It's a hatpin used to anchor instead of injure. It's a Saturday spent learning a new way to be ordinary. You bank the glow of that knowledge like coals. Tomorrow will ask for heat. You will be ready. Change has a way of tapping at the windows like rain before it decides to come in properly. In the weeks after the exhibition, you find yourself listening for it, ears tuned to the small weather of your house, eyes measuring the distance between how things have always been and how they might be tomorrow. Some days the sky is nothing but old news. Others, a sudden squall of newness blows the soot off familiar sills. It begins on a Wednesday with a smell. Not the comforting onions and stock sort that says supper is a promise. Not the acrid ghost of a well-scolded iron, but a scent like a chemical argument, sweet then sharp, then something that suggests eyes should water and throats protest. Cook appears at your study door, apron wrung like a neck she spared. "If you please, ma'am," she whispers, because house panics must be small to fit behind propriety. "The new ice chest. There's a leak, I think." You're on your feet before the old version of yourself can say, "Perhaps later." The kitchen air carries the warning. Sally sits on a stool with a tight mouth, breathing too fast. The refrigerator, the proud silvered box your husband had caressed in the shop like a greyhound, hums with the satisfied indifference of a problem that thinks it cannot be questioned. Windows, you say, and every hand finds a latch. Back door too. Agnes is already moving, her face doing sums. Who can be spared? What must be covered? Where the tea things will migrate if the kitchen is temporarily a laboratory. Sally outside, you add, and she lurches grateful. The yard's pale daylight looks like kindness. The repairman arrives at a gallop that pretends not to be. He smells of last week's pipes and hurry. He kneels, listens with his head cocked like a dog at a person who speaks 3 languages none of them share, and then turns to you with the composed blandness of a man trained to soothe. Happens sometimes with these new chillers, madam. Tiny leak in the coil. Better now than high summer. Better never, you reply, pleasant enough to keep him human. Pointed enough to make him write something careful on his little pad. You will fit a shut-off tap. You will return every fortnight to inspect. You will teach my staff what gas smells like in a kitchen and what to do when the smell has the wrong adjective. He blinks, then nods. Of course. His pencil scrapes, tap, inspection. Instruction, words that make a new contract out of the older. Lazier one. After he leaves, you take the kettle down from its exile and look at the staff. Cook stern as a sermon. Lottie eager like a page boy given a message. Sally pale but recovering now that her lungs are working away from the danger. You speak calmly and directly. You have practiced this tone on difficult butchers and opinionated mothers. No one is to turn this thing on unless it behaves. No one is to be brave with invisible poisons. Bravery is for fires you can see. Sally nods, eyes wet for reasons that have nothing to do with fumes. That afternoon you write to your sister about the incident with the narrative briskness of women who have decided that safety will be contagious or they will make it so. Helen writes back with a story of her own. A neighbor in the country who bought an electric heater against the chill and nearly turned her parlor into a lesson in combustion. They sell these marvels with a bouquet and no instructions. Helen fumes. I told Edward if he wishes to electrify things he may begin with his wits. You laugh, then underline 2 sentences and tuck the letter into the stack of proofs that will become your house's unofficial manual. Electricity for the living, not the dead. Clara's Tuesday fitting turns out to be a small drama disguised as quiet triumph. She arrives alone, cheeks bright with the audacity of autonomy. Agnes meets her at the door and evaporates into parcel carrying as planned, leaving the girl to you. Together you visit Marylebone without the escort of anyone's disapproval. Mrs. Linton deploys the same formidable serenity with Clara she deployed with Ellen. No pity, no gush, only an expectation that bodies deserve accommodation. Behind the screen, Clara's training stays come off with a sigh that might be pain or relief or both. The toil goes on. The laces move. The visible happens that is largely invisible. A girl touches the border of comfort and flinches as if she's done wrong. When she emerges, the change is minute and radical. Shoulders down, eyes up, breath that doesn't apologize. Walk, Mrs. Linton says. Clara does, then sits all the way back and laughs at the discovery. She looks at you, alarmed by her own immodest joy. Is it allowed to feel like this? She asks. It is allowed to live, you say. Everything else is costume. On the way out, you spot Mrs. Henderson through the shop window, across the street, arm in arm with a woman who collects grievances as if they were porcelain. You do not panic. You do what women have always done. You improvise a fiction that is truer than the truth will be allowed to be. Hats, you say brightly, steering Clara by the elbow into the milliner's next door. We have been instructed to consider brims. A quarter hour later, you emerge with a sensible straw trimmed in navy, receipts a plausible coverlet on the act of rebellion you have just midwifed. Clara squeezes your hand before she scurries toward a cab. I was drowning, she says simply. You do not say I know because some rescues are private even from their rescuers. You say Tuesday next because repetition is how change survives. Your own repetitions multiply. You wear the health corset daily now except when duty demands the old armor for an hour here or there to satisfy a mother, a hostess, a dinner whose stakes are a man's. The difference is measurable in the units you invented for yourself. Stairs climbed without bargaining. Letters written without the skull ache that used to be the tax on afternoon thought. The unremarkable grace of bending to pick up a dropped glove without calculating an audience. Your husband notices in the way men notice weather after it has already changed the day. "You've been, well," he says one evening, as if you had been ill with a fashionable ailment and are now cured by the tonic of his good management. You smile and pass him the salt. If he wants to claim the sun as his invention, let him. You will take the light. A letter arrives from your mother in reply to your carefully phrased description of the exhibition. It is the sort of letter that would set off small explosives in your chest if you had not grown practiced at disarming them as you read. "I fear, dearest, that modern women are being encouraged towards slovenliness by persons who will not be there when the consequences must be lived with," she begins. Then softens. "Perhaps your talk of dinners and dignity found its mark. That said, Ellen did look uncommonly well at church, and I dare say a girl's health should be considered if it improves her color. Do bring me that rosewater cream receipt. There is no virtue in a face that cracks." You close your eyes and count to 5. In your mother's dialect, this is as close to capitulation as grammar allows. You copy out the beeswax and rose formula in a hand she respects, tee it with a ribbon she cannot claim is too modern, and send it off with a note that deploys the words "good sense" and "housekeeping" in bold positions. You will not win her into bicycles. You might win her into breath. Agnes's stays arrive on Monday with the quiet ceremony of a miracle kept dignified. You do not watch her try them. You only wait in your sitting room with a book and the pretense of not listening. When she enters, you do not gasp or cheer. You nod, and she nods. And then both of you allow your faces the small, unguarded joy usually reserved for babies and rain after 2 hot days. "They fit," she says, marvel and fact at once. I carried the scuttle and reached the top step without the dizziness. She does not say, "I cried in the hallway where no one would see." She does not need to say it. The shine in her eyes has not entirely dried. "Mrs. Linton, you say, is to be sent every woman you like." "I have a list," she says, with a conspirator's modesty. "The housemaid at number 12. The butcher's wife, she has that cough I don't trust, my cousin. Myself again, when wages allow." You produce an envelope from your desk. Modest, possible, planned the moment you saw your accounts would bear it. "Advance," you say, and hold it out. "On the wages that are, for once, not merely your due, but your breath." She hesitates because pride has been a better corset than whale for women like her. You tip the scale. Call it a household safety expense. I find this keeps the universe from objecting. She accepts. Not for herself, never that, but for the list already written in her head. The house absorbs these changes the way bodies absorb small medicines. Gradually, with occasional murmurs, until the day you realize the fever has broken. Ellen's laugh redistributes itself from careful to careless within a fortnight. Emma invents a game with switches that she plays under your eyes until she can be trusted to play it under her own. Even Mrs. Peters, who has policed propriety with a fierceness that has saved you from ruin at least twice, loosens her own laces a whisper after the washing is hung. "No sense fainting over sheets," she mutters, as if giving permission to the air and herself simultaneously. Not every story bends to your will. The papers cheerfully report a new ordinance in Paris about hat-pin covers, after a man lost an eye on an omnibus, and Mrs. Pevensey arrives at tea in a hat that could harpoon a whale, her pins naked as knives. "They'll never make me wear rubber on my points," she declares, and you do not rise to the bait. You pass sandwiches and imagine a time when your granddaughters will roll their eyes at the notion that women were once expected to dress as if fending off pirates at all hours. A darker piece of news arrives via Helen, a mutual acquaintance, Mrs. Allen, who tried a fashionable black hair dye at a London salon and came away with trembling hands that will not obey her. "Silver nitrate, they say," Helen writes, "though you'd think by now they'd have tried it on. Something other than ladies." You write back with the cold cream receipt and a suggestion that Mrs. Allen, try hennas brought by an Indian ayah you met once at a charity bazaar, plant, not poison, the kind of difference men writing advertisements rarely bother to learn. On a rare, bright Saturday, you take Ellen to the park with a parcel you do not show her until you are half a mile from any person likely to tut. Inside, the divided skirt Mrs. Linton cut for country exercise. Ellen's eyes widen. She looks around as if policemen grow under shrubs. "Here?" she asks, excitement and fear evenly matched. "Here," you say, with the calm of someone who will take responsibility if responsibility must be taken. Behind a hedge you help her change. The transformation is purely practical and wholly revolutionary. The skirt looks like a skirt when her feet are together. It becomes a new verb when she strides. You do not have a bicycle to hand, and perhaps that is merciful. You simply let her walk. 10 paces, 20, 50. At 30 she giggles. At 50, she looks like a person who discovered there was a door in a wall and that the knob had been under her palm for years. Eventually she returns, cheeks flushed the right way. "Feels like cheating," she says, breathless. "Feels like correct," you say. "Leave cheating for men at cards." You do not see your husband watching from a distance, having strolled out secretly to practice saying no with gentleness he can live with. He sees only a mother and a daughter laughing as if they have misplaced their grief. It occurs to him, perhaps for the first time, that the things he thinks he allows are often things women do, because they have decided the world will bend or break, and bending seems less messy. At dinner, he does not forbid anything. He simply asks, casually as a man might inquire about the weather on a continent he will never visit, "Did you walk far?" You say, "Far enough," and the subject drops because the roast requires attention that both of you prefer to this particular philosophy. The following week, the exhibition publishes a pamphlet with your favorite 3 words on the cover: health, comfort, beauty, and you order a dozen for strategic dispersal. One goes to the vicar's wife with a note about parish girls fainting at choir practice. Religion tolerates reform when it looks pastoral. One to the headmistress at Ellen's old school with a gift for the library. Education will adopt anything once it becomes a matter of standards. One to Mrs. Pevensey pinned inside a recipe for seed cake. Bribery with carbohydrates, ancient and effective. One to your mother, wrapped in lace paper with a sprig of dried lavender, accompanied by the cold cream in a jar labeled in your best hand for gardeners of faces. If she throws away the pamphlet, she may yet keep the jar. It is not nothing. And then, because life insists on itself even inside revolutions, Tuesday dawns with rain and bills. A maid chips a china saucer and weeps. The fishmonger brings soles so fresh they look offended. Agnes finds that Mrs. Linton has set aside a scrap of ribbon for Emma, for the doll who will never be corseted. Your husband returns home prematurely triumphant about a business proposal that sounds suspiciously like gambling requires a table. You smile and nod and serve and refuse and approve and write and breathe. That last, most of all, breathe. You end the day at your desk with the window cracked an inch and the city's wet voice sliding in along the sash. You write to Helen to fix July for the country, the lane, the bicycle, the afternoon when you will wear the divided skirt in open rebellion and your husband will survive it. You write to Clara to remind her of Tuesday, of how walls are only walls until you learn their seams. You write to Mrs. Linton to thank her not for garments, but for arithmetic done on behalf of lungs. You write to your mother because daughters write, even when they secretly wish to be adopted by women who pinch less. You blow out the lamp and the room reminds you the switch is there now. You flick it. Light. You flick it again. Dark. You stand for one extra breath in the in-between, hand on the little ivory smile on the wall, and think, this is how it goes. On, off, old, new. All of it handled, if you're careful, by a woman who knows when to let current pass and when to cut it at the source. You get into bed with the kind ache of a day that did not steal from your bones. Your husband reaches for your hand, as if to test whether you're still there. You are. You have never been more there. In the next room, Ellen turns over in her sleep without the sound a girl makes when a busk has bitten all day. Down the hall, Agnes's breath evens, shoulders at last resting where God intended. In the yard, a cat makes a night of it. In the kitchen, the refrigerator sulks quietly. cowed by the new shut-off tap and the knowledge that a household has decided it will not be menaced. Change continues its tapping. You resolve, drowsy and decisive, to open the window wider tomorrow. The rain will come in. Let it, floors dry. Lungs are harder to repair. The invitation from Helen arrives with a pressed cowslip inside and the unmistakable impatience of a sister who has decided your lungs need hedgerows. Come the second week of July, she writes. The lanes are tame, the blackberries are scheming, and my bicycle waits with a bell that believes in itself. She adds, with a knowing sting, bring common sense, sturdy boots, and the will to scandalize precisely no one who matters. You show the letter to Agnes first, your barometer for weather that involves logistics. We'll need a trunk that forgives grass stains, she says crisply, already seeing to the laundering of a future. And if we are to conduct outdoor exercises, the underthings should be the merciful ones. Ellen reads the cowslip as a promise. Emma holds it to her nose and announces it smells like a story. Your mother, informed as a courtesy rather than a request, prescribes an itinerary heavy with decorum and hats. Country air is all very well, she says, but one mustn't turn rustic. And no divided garments in view of neighbors. People talk, she says, people like a curse. You hear it as a choir. Your husband is surprisingly easy. Go, he says in the tone of a man granting shore leave to a deserving crew. You're always more agreeable after a week with your sister. You cannot decide whether to be insulted or relieved. So you choose the third option, expedite departure before the weather of his permission changes. The train to Helen's cuts the county like a sentence that forgot to stop. London loosens its fingers from your sleeve, one soot-softened field at a time. Emma's face glues itself to the window. Ellen pretends to read, but keeps finding excuses to press her wrist to the glass, as if her pulse needs to certify the speed. Agnes counts the parcels and then counts them again, in case the mathematics of fresh air disorients familiar. Numbers. Opposite you sits a woman bound for relatives near St. Albans, her waist a pamphlet for everything you have begun to undo. She dozes the way tightly laced women do, upright and brittle, and you make a silent pact with the countryside to smuggle her one deep breath if she nods far enough to forget herself. Helen collects you at the little station with a wave so robust it could signal ships. Her house isn't grand. It's adequate the way a well-made loaf is, a shape that promises function and keeps it. Roses attempt to conquer the front steps. The hedges have learned to tolerate children. Inside, the air has the smell of women who own their time from breakfast to dusk, not because no one asks for it, but because they've built fences clever enough to confuse requests. Bicycles tomorrow, she says, ushering you through rooms arranged by someone who thinks about how bodies move rather than how visitors judge. Today, boots and lanes and a hill that will point out your lungs to you. You walk out under a sky that forgot to be grey. The path is stitched with cow parsley and pricked with the blue of Speedwell. The hedges are full of birds making decisions in public. Ellen breathes like someone who fears generosity might be rescinded and takes extra while the clerk isn't watching. Emma runs until memory of London's rules collides with the present's invitation. At the brow of the hill, Helen stops and grins. This is where I made my bargain, she says. I told myself I could continue to be carried by a corset and the opinions of women who sit in rooms, or I could carry myself and learn to not fall. She laughs. I fell, of course, but afterwards I could tell the truth about it. That evening there is simple supper and elaborate talk. About gas leaks? None. About a neighbor who wears a taxidermied woodcock on Sundays? Odious. About a doctor who prescribed a brisk constitutional to a woman who actually needs a new husband. Electricity in Helen's house is a rumor and a future. Lamps burn with a domestic flame that respects walls. The only snapping wire is your mother's voice arriving in memory, trying to rewind your hem. Agnes sleeps in the little room under the eaves and wakes at dawn to an argument between the sun and a blackbird. She goes down early to charm the cook and negotiate for a kettle before the household becomes itself. When you appear in the doorway in your robe and the health corset that acts like a conspirator rather than a guard, she is already laying out the divided skirt for the afternoon, the parcel disguised as respectability, the ribbon tactfully plain, shall we? Helen says at noon, when the son has learned how to be kind instead of critical. The bicycles lean against the stone wall with the confidence of tools meant to be used. Ellen touches the curve of the saddle as if it might object. It doesn't. Agnes, practical saint, has made certain none of you wears a hat that could impale a passerby. Your first mounting is not elegant. It is not a painting. It is a woman who has been told for 20 years that speed belongs to people with pockets. The machine wobbles under your certainty, then steadies when you decide steadiness is not something you must ask anyone else to grant. You push, you lift, you pedal. The lane unfurls like relieved ribbon. The sensation is not flight. It is not sea. It is not anything poetry promised. It is your own weight, forgetting to be a burden. The divided skirt behaves like a respectable liar, looks like propriety at rest, becomes permission in motion. Your lungs go about their business without comment, an ordinary miracle you want to hoard and spend at once. Behind you, Ellen squeals, then bites her lip because she has been taught not to make joy sound like that in front of adults. You turn your head and command her, squeal. She obeys, and the lane applauds with insects. You ride to the fork, where the hedgerow gives up pretending to be a wall. You stop because bicycle bells are loud enough, and women in fields do not need to add bicycle bells to the catalogue of what jars a sheep. You and Helen stand, hands on handlebars, giggling with the cracked dignity of girls rediscovering a game no one can beat them at, because they make the rules as they pedal. Ellen stands between you, cheeks red in the way England approves, proof of exertion without vulgarity. It ends because all afternoons end. On the way back, you are hailed by Mrs. Plimpton, the vicar's wife, who holds opinions like knitting needles. Mrs. Collins, she says, stepping into your sunlight. How brave. The word is a saucer with something unflattering in it. Brave, you say evenly, or normal given the terrain. She blinks. One must think of appearances. We are, you reply. Healthy appearances interest me most. It is not a retort. It's a weather report. She squints. Helen smiles. The guileless smile of a woman who knows hell freezes when you don't feed it with reaction. Back at the house, Agnes makes lemonade with more ceremony than Punch has ever enjoyed. She passes the glasses in a tray with the elegance of a duchess who discovered trays are crowns, if carried correctly. How did we do? She asks, taking, in your hair that once had a life, in your calves that have just discovered they do. Fewer near murders than my wedding day, you say, and she laughs in a note that makes you want to buy her a piano. That night, you sit on Helen's back steps and watch bats scribble stories critics will dislike. Emma drops a pebble into the water butt and informs you solemnly that this is called gravity. Ellen, with her pamphlet spread on her lap, like a deity she has decided to worship, asks, "May we ever like this in London?" Not yet, you say, thinking of Mrs. Pevensey and how she makes weather in other women's hallways. But soon enough for you, the horizon moves if you push it. The horizon indeed moves, with a masculine cough and a creak of the front gate. Your husband, announced by the carriage and his particular knock, has come to spend a night and see the girls, which translated means have one last chance to be the author of what happens next. He embraces the children with legitimate warmth, and you with a kiss whose temperature is social. Supper is friendly. Helen remains an orchestra of poise. Bicycles, he says, pouring claret. I've been told you are experimenting. Practicing, you correct. One practices a safe thing to ensure it remains so. He swirls. People talk. They always have, you say lightly. Let them rest. In the morning, he strolls out for the performance he came to. See, you and Ellen in divided skirts, wheels at the ready, standing in the lane like punctuation about to change the sentence. You meet his eyes squarely. He takes in the garments, the absence of a crowd, the presence of women who intend to be reasonable and are also done asking permission that does not affect the price of bread. Country, he says, in the tone of a judge issuing a lenient sentence. And only the lane. I'd prefer not to read about this in anyone's letter. Country, you agree. Lane, letters can contain more interesting sins. You push off. He watches you go with a face that cannot decide whether to scowl or soften. By the second bend, he is reducing the danger in his mind to the size of his ability to control it. Men often mistake proximity for influence. You exploit the confusion without cruelty. At lunch, he surprises you. You looked well, he says, as if admitting a meteorological error. Less delicate. Delicate, you say pleasantly, is a story that sells fainting couches. He laughs and surrenders a small flag. Bring the bicycle here again next month. I'll try not to be shocked twice. You want to punch the air like a boy on a green, so instead you pass the mustard. Compromise, like cycling, is balance achieved by motion. In the late afternoon, Agnes asks for a walk to see the lane for myself. You go with her because there are things women say to each other in hedges that would die of embarrassment indoors. Halfway to the fork, she stops, lifts her sleeve, and shows you the fading crescent bruises that map a decade of stays cut by someone's idea of duty. My mother, she says quietly, used to bite the inside of her cheek while lacing me, so no one would hear her cry. She believed that made her good. I'm sorry, you say. It is the only truthful line in the script that doesn't try to fix what you cannot. She drops the sleeve. Now, she says, a small tiny cathedral of content in the word, I can run if cook shouts and I don't see stars if I pick up the coal scuttle wrong. It makes the hallway feel more like my place and less like a service I commute to. We will make it more yours, you answer, and nearly bring up the envelope you pressed on her last week before remembering that help works best when wrapped in the dignity of wages and not savior stories. You return to the house by the long way, which is to say you add an extra field and decide not to apologize to the clock. Emma meets you in the kitchen with both hands stuck into a jar of cold cream Helen made with rosewater, her face shiny with a future that will never know lead. Do I look like a statue? She asks. Like the one in the churchyard? You look like a person, you say. Statues are for men who get plaques. On the day you travel back, the train coughs and bangs and does its level best to remain on the rails. The carriage opposite is filled with girls, no longer girls, governesses and seamstresses, and the women the city calls companions because it cannot yet bear to call them workers. Halfway to London, the woman with the St. Albans relatives, she, of the earlier misfortune, slumps with the grey tint that makes Agnes's fingers move without orders. You both cross the aisle, a two-person emergency service. Loosen, you say softly, already at her back, fingertips deft. We'll make more room. Her eyes fly open, half a protest, half a plea. My aunt will be proud you did not die, Agnes says in the tone that prevents argument. The stays give. Air enters like a friend who didn't wait to be announced. The woman blinks, the ugly sparkle fading from the edges of her sight. A man 2 seats away rises to tut about propriety, sees the set of your mouth and finds himself interested in the scenery. Thank you, the woman whispers, not sure whether to be grateful or ashamed. Grateful, you instruct. Shame is for people who sell you garments you can't live in. A doctor in a bowler appears from the next carriage, smelling faintly of hours and antiseptic. He takes in the scene and nods briskly. Quite right, he says, blessing the loosened laces with the authority of a man who will be listened to by your husband. In future, miss, leave yourself a thought of room. Bodies hate tight instructions. He steps back into his day, and you add one more member to your small private choir of the sane. London receives you with a stare that thinks it's a welcome. The house wakes up under your feet, switches behaving, refrigerator subdued by the memory of your dangerous tone. There is post. A square envelope with your mother's hand, a complaint disguised as advice, a neat missive from Mrs. Linton. Clara stood all the way back in the chair. Progress. A note from Constance announcing a pedestrian rally. In the park. Walking en masse in reasonable clothes, which sounds both thrilling and reasonable, a combination known to change things. At tea, Mr. Braithwaite, retired shipbuilder, part-time sage, calls by with his cane and a story about a chandelier that bit a baronet. Wires like bad rigging, he snorts. No one trims them but men who talk as if they invented storms. He accepts a biscuit and the news that your girls learned to ride. Good, he says. Balance in the body breeds balance in the head. Country is where sense goes to nap. Bring it back to town with you. It's needed. That evening, in the square of hours between dinner and the pensive quiet where you write, your husband tells you of an associate's wife who has been unwell. He describes fainting in a gallery, headaches like divine punishment, appetite that left like a guest insulted. You ask cautious questions, and he answers as men do when they sense there is a trap beyond the truth. She's very fashionable, he admits. Perhaps retiring her corset a half-inch might cure her piety, you suggest, mild as rain. He doesn't answer at once. He's thinking of you on a bicycle, of his own heart failing to stop beating when you did it. Perhaps, he says, finally, and the word clicks into the lock of a door that will open soon enough. When the house is quiet, you write 2 letters you've been composing in your head all day. The first, to Lady Harberton, proposing a tea at which a certain doctor in a bowler might speak sense to men who could sign checks on behalf of their wives' lungs. You describe Mr. Braithwaite and his unexpected solidarity. You volunteer your sitting room and your patience. We will offer sandwiches and the absence of hysteria, you write. I find both weapons effective. The second to Clara. Your Tuesday appointment coincides with my mother's tendency to be elsewhere. Come after, and sit in the blue room. I attach a recipe for cold cream, not because your skin requires it, but because our world does. Before you sleep, you go to the nursery. Ellen rolls over with the ordinary grace of an animal in its correct habitat. Emma snores softly, drooling into a pillow with a linen case embroidered by a woman who never once had enough air, and yet taught her needle to behave. You smooth hair, adjust blankets, and say the secular prayers of women who keep the weather out of rooms. Back in your own bed, you loosen your laces until the day drops off like a coat. You lie on your back and feel your heart doing mathematics you don't need to understand. Outside, the city coughs and blesses and forgets. Inside, Agnes moves in the hall with the hush of someone who has earned corridors. You consider the horizon, how far it came toward you this week, how likely it is to retreat if not pursued, and make the promise you have learned to make without ceremony. You will keep walking. You will keep pedaling. You will keep smuggling oxygen through borders that insist they are ornamental. Tomorrow there will be laundry, and a petition to sign about hatpin covers. You will sign it and deliver a sly barbed compliment to Mrs. Pevensy's adornments. And a visit from your mother. You will survive both her criticisms and her love. And a kettle to inspect always. And a child to encourage every day. And a husband to disabuse gently of the romance of fragility again. Tomorrow the horizon will move if the women push it. You intend to wake up with your hands already on it. The circular from Constance arrives with the defiant neatness of a woman who writes, standing up. A pedestrian rally, it announces, to demonstrate the ease and decency of rational dress in motion. No speeches longer than a breath, no garments longer than sense, no apologies at all. Saturday, 2 o'clock, Hyde Park, North Carriage Drive. Below, in a hand you recognize as Lady Harberton's, a footnote. Bring daughters. Bring boots that agree with you. Bring the sort of patience that looks like cheerfulness to hostile eyes. You lay the paper on your desk like a map of a road you have been walking in your head for weeks. Ellen sees it and pretends not to, then pretends to notice it casually. Emma demands to know whether a rally is a picnic, a parade, or that thing with men who shout. You tell her it is a walk. You leave out for now. that it is the sort of walk that puts its hands against the furniture of a century and shifts it an inch. Your mother sends her own circular, the familial kind, asking after your soul's posture. I hope all your recent exertions have not turned you coarse, she writes in the tone of a woman who believes the word coarse is an exorcism. I enclose a notice about hatpin protectors being made compulsory in certain vulgar municipalities. Perhaps we may agree for once that the modern world requires covers. She has drawn a tidy arrow to the newspaper paragraph as if citing scripture. Perhaps we may, you reply, letting an unaccustomed smile into your pen. You include, because you are not above small victories disguised as recipes, a jar of the rosewater and beeswax cream labeled in a hand she cannot dismiss. For gardeners of faces. You add a card for the rally, wrapped in polite phrasing, tied with a ribbon that makes the word rational look like a cousin of respectable. Your husband reads Constance's circular over toast and says, with the benevolence of a man who prefers his revolutions at a distance, "By all means walk. No bicycles, I assume." You assure him he has divined the rule correctly. He glances at Ellen, registrar of future reputations, and adds, "It will do you good to be seen among proper people doing a proper thing." He cannot hear the uppercase letters snapping around proper. You can. You do not argue with them. You intend to reuse the ribbon. The morning of the rally dawns with the sort of weather London calls encouragement, not raining in a way that matters. Agnes moves through the house like a plan wearing shoes. She lays out your walking dress with a firmness that says it will be enough, not heroic. She produces Ellen's divided skirt, cut for country exercise, but slyly passable in a city if worn with the correct stride, and inspects the hem for anything that might trip a future. For Emma, she chooses a white frock that will not stay white, and a ribbon that will. "There," she says, tying as if she has prepared a small soldier for a benign war. At 1 o'clock, Mr. Braithwaite knocks with his cane as prelude and a question as dessert. "Might a retired shipbuilder walk with a fleet?" he asks, eyes merry under eyebrows that have refused to age. "My doctor insists demure exercise prolongs the spectacle of me." You take his arm with a gratitude. That does not mention tactics. A decent man beside a decent woman is a kind of shield that reads, well, in the papers, Hyde Park does not announce itself as a chapter in anyone's book. It is simply a park. Trees behaving, gravel minding itself, children bursting into and out of families like punctuation. But the air holds a crackle you can taste. Women arrive in ones and twos and threes, some with faces set to "I'm merely walking," some with expressions that say, "I will be counted today even if no one keeps the numbers." Here, a governess in boots that respect joints. There, a seamstress in a jacket cut for action. A widow in decent black that refuses to starve her of movement. A cluster of shop girls with laughter they have not asked permission to bring. Constance stands at the appointed place with a clipboard, as if she were scheduling an invasion, and an umbrella, as if scheduling weather. Lady Harberton wears a hat that behaves and a smile that does not. Entirely. The rules are simple and pinned to a board. Walk abreast where the path allows. Do not jostle. Do not argue. Do not faint. Do not apologize. Do not under any circumstances permit your dignity to be mistaken for silence. A few men hover with notebooks. One has a moustache that believes it is a sword. You nod to him in the way a woman nods to a dog that is not hers and continues to hold its owner on a lead. The whistle is not a whistle. It is a handkerchief raised and lowered like a flag. The group, 50 then 100, then far more than you can count without losing your footing, moves. You move. The gravel accepts you. Breath organizes itself into a choir. There is no chanting, no slogans, nothing that can be caricatured as shrill. Just women doing the ordinary thing they have been cautioned against doing too conspicuously. Occupying space with purpose. Ellen holds her head like a person who has learned she may. Her divided skirt reads decorous until she lengthens her step, at which point it reads intelligent. Emma waves to a dog as if it were an ally. Agnes shadows your flank so quietly that you forget she is there until you feel the subtle adjustment of your shawl she performs without breaking stride. Mr. Braithwaite keeps pace, cane tapping like a metronome, reminding the city of its beat. There is heckling. Of course, because London pays no taxes on wit and expends it freely. Off to the circus. A gentleman calls, his voice dressed in clubroom. "Your wives are already there," Mr. Braithwaite replies without looking up, and the man decides to be interested in a tree. Near the Serpentine, a cluster of young bucks try a different tack. "Ladies, a race, prize to the fastest." Constance turns, smiling, and says, "The prize shall be a lecture from your mothers." The bucks, allergic to mothers, evaporate into other amusements. The papers will say later that it was all very mild. The papers will be wrong. The mildness is the method. The radical part is the ease. A woman walking in clothes that serve her is an unflattering mirror to a civilization that prefers its women decorative and breathless. You feel the eyes on you. Some approving, some curious, some offended, because offense is how certain people confess to fear. You keep your pace and think about how many times you have slowed for someone else's story. Not today. At the turn near the bandstand, a small knot forms. A girl no more than 16 has stopped, her hand at her ribs, her face the chalk of effort denied oxygen. You're beside her in 3 strides. Agnes is already at her laces. "May we?" you murmur, because consent is part of the revolution. She nods, ashamed, and you feel fury, hot and pointless at that shame. The stays give. The girl inhales like a person returning from water. Constance appears with a paper fan. A matron offers a sip from a flask that is medicinal in intent and daylit in composition. "I wanted to come," the girl whispers, cheeks flaming with the double heat of effort and self-scold. "Mother would die if she knew." "She will not," you say, "and you must not either." You eye her garments, cut to win a mother's approval, guaranteed to lose a daughter's breath. "Walk with us at the edge," you suggest. No one's mother has ever condemned a stroll undertaken near shrubbery. She laughs, which ratifies the cure. You do not ask her name. There are too many of you today to keep them all. You keep the image instead, a face learning the feel of blood in proper places. It happens then, the moment every rally hopes for and cannot script. A boy, perhaps 12, perhaps brave, perhaps foolish, steps from the path with a stick held at thigh height, a prank's cheap midwife. A woman at the front sees it too late. Her foot catches, the line wobbles. You feel the ripple of balance threatened, the collective intake, the old expectation that women will crumple to keep the peace. They do not. The woman stumbles and does not fall. Mr. Braithwaite's cane darts like a harpoon and flicks the stick aside with the practiced economy of a man who has once saved a sailor. Before the boy can ransack the moment for redemption or pride, Lady Harberton is there. No scold, no spectacle. "Walk with us," she tells him evenly, as if he is enrolled. "Learn how to do it properly." The boy, astonished into obedience, does. The crowd exhales. The music, there is no music, resumes. By the time you complete the circuit, the city has decided whether to be amused, bored, or changed. It chooses all 3 in unequal measures, which is how real things go. Constance mounts the least obtrusive bench in London and says into the crisp afternoon, "Thank you. That is all. No sermon, no inventory of grievances. Enough women have had their grievances inventoried by those who found them decorative." You go home not triumphant, but right-sized. Tea tastes the way tea tastes when you have spent yourself at a decent rate. Your husband greets you at the door with an expression that says he has decided to be pleased. "No headlines," he says, relief and a twinge of disappointment arm in arm. "Only notes in the afternoon pages." He shows you a column already ink-wet. "Ladies perambulate. Claims of health, comfort." The writer has tried to be droll and has failed into civility. You count that as a column inch's worth of victory. Your mother arrives, of course, carried by rumor, escorted by duty. She inspects you as if you are a mantelpiece someone has overpolished. "You're not flushed," she concedes, "nor indecently fatigued." She peers past you, searching for scandal. "Was Mrs. Pevensey in attendance?" She prefers to patrol rather than perambulate, you say, and your mother allows the corner of her mouth 1 degree of softness. You hand her a jar, the cream, and the card. The rally, embossed unknowingly with the fact you have survived both. Gardeners of faces, she reads aloud, tasting the phrase. Translation: I might use this and pretend I invented it. She does not hand the jar back. Your girl, she adds, meaning Ellen, looked very well at church last week. I am pleased to see that posture can be achieved without theatrics. In your mother's dialect. This is an apology and an alliance disguised as a truism. Ellen brings you the afternoon papers as if they were birds she has trained. The illustrations are better than the words, women drawn almost accurately as women and not as jokes. One woodcut, placed low on page 3 and therefore secretly important, shows a mother holding a child with one arm and a placard with the other. The placard doesn't shout. It reads simply, "Let me breathe." You pin the clipping inside your desk. You will pull it out on later nights when you suspect yourself of making this all up out of discomfort and vanity. In the evening, your drawing room fills in a different way. A small gathering assembled under your new electric chandelier, the one your husband has pretended not to be proud of and now cannot stop glancing at. You invited Mr. Braithwaite, obviously, and the doctor who blessed your train carriage lacing. You discovered his name, Dr. Baines, via a note scribbled by Constance onto your circular. You invited 2 husbands of intelligent wives because change runs fastest when men do not think it is making them lose a race. You invited, for balance and courage, the vicar's wife, who owns knitting needles, opinions, and a sensible pulse. Agnes stages sandwiches and tea with that version of competence which looks, to the untrained, like magic. You keep it brief. As Lady Harberton taught, oxygen is not for speeches. Dr. Baines clears his throat and speaks the language of men fluent in diagrams. He shows a drawing of a rib cage that has not been bullied. He describes diaphragms without blushing at the word. He charts the consequences of tight instructions on bowels and babies without blaming women for doing as they were told. We recommend, he says in the humble plural that makes men listen, that fashion treat the human form as a partner rather than a problem to be solved by siege. Mr. Braithwaite thumps his cane once in approval. The husbands blink and find themselves nodding. The vicar's wife asks 3 excellent questions about girls in choir and fainting in pews. The chandelier hums approval. The switches behave. After the guests go, your husband pours a small brandy and stares thoughtfully into middle distance, where men store new information while deciding how much of it they will acknowledge publicly. The doctor spoke well, he says finally. Reasonable. You know I prefer reasonable over what you call shrill. You finish because marriage is a language and you can conjugate his tenses. Yes, Dr. Baines is a useful man. Useful, he repeats, and in that word you hear him just beginning to imagine that useful might be a compliment men could pay to women's comfort. He hesitates, then adds surprisingly, if the rally did no other thing, it made you look. He pauses, searching for a word that is not pretty, not composed, not any of the things men are taught to compliment, because they do not threaten the state of the world. Present, he says at last, echoing perhaps without knowing, the word he used the night your dining room first turned on like a dawn. Perhaps I am, you say again, and you mean it more. That night, when the house has finished its signing off, lamps, switches, breath inspected, you stand in Ellen's doorway and watch the slow rise-fall of a girl who walked among women without asking what it looked like from the curb. Emma sleeps in the defiant starfish of children who trust floors to bear them. In the hall, Agnes moves with a quiet that is not apology but ownership. Your mother, in her own house, opens a jar of cream and permits its scent to remind her of gardens that do not require suffering to be tended. You undress. The health corset releases you with the same courtesy it exerted in holding you. You look at the bruise map on your ribs, the old ones like faded borders on a map of a country you no longer wish to visit, the new skin between them learning to be unremarkable. In the mirror, your posture has the modest arrogance of a person who can meet her own eyes without bargaining with anyone else's first. Before sleep, you take out the clipping, the woodcut of the woman with the placard. You imagine the illustrator's hand, the moments when his line nearly broke and then found its path again. You imagine the printer's apprentice feeding paper into a machine that spits out 1,000 small possibilities, and a shop boy hawking those possibilities on a corner. Ladies walk. Health and comfort. You imagine a girl upstairs in a narrow room counting coins and, between 1 and 2, memorizing the words by accident. Rain begins. Real, not administrative. It taps the windows with the politeness of a guest who will enter whether invited or not. Tomorrow will be washing and menus and mending and one more, careful. Lesson about chords and switches for Sally. It will be a note to Constance. Thank you for the absence of speeches, and a packet sent to Clara with a ribbon and a pamphlet and the instruction, walk when you can. It will be because you have decided. Another small act, the sort nobody writes about and everyone breathes because you did it. You draw the counterpane up, loosen what remains of the day's grip on your sternum, and let your lungs do the thing you have been practicing like an art. Air in, air out, untheatrical, sufficient. The city thrums. The wires in your walls hum a lullaby that is not quite music and not quite warning. You sleep as a woman who has learned her name in a crowd by hearing it from her own mouth first. The week after the rally begins with 3 kinds of post. Congratulations from women, worry from mothers, and an invitation from electricity. The last arrives in the form of a pamphlet pushed through your letter slot by a young man whose hat apologizes for his profession. Modern home comforts, it declaims, with illustrations and safety notes. You flip through diagrams that try to look friendly and pages that try not to look like warnings. There is a picture of a smiling housewife pouring tea from an electric kettle with one hand and touching a wet windowsill with the other. Someone has drawn a discreet little lightning bolt near her elbow, as if to indicate cheerfulness will be provided by shock. You pin the pamphlet to your desk, a specimen of optimism that forgot to read the room, and plan what you will do with it, turn it into a meeting. The city obliges with your case study. 2 nights later, at the house of Mrs. Littleton, 3 doors down, a woman who sprinkles compliments on guests the way a cook sprinkles salt. You smell burning at an hour that has no business smelling of anything. Agnes has not yet come upstairs. You find her in the hall with her hair halfway between duty and night, head lifted like a bird's. Iron, she says softly, already moving. The house is not on fire. The house wants to be. In the laundry room, the electric iron lies face down like a fallen soldier on the ironing board, a halo of brown around its temper. Lottie, the junior maid, stands frozen, hand at her mouth. The picture of a girl who looked at a switch and decided it had opinions. Off, you say. Gentle and fast, and Agnes is already there. Dry hands plug at the body, not the cord. She lifts the iron by its wooden handle, as if it has sinned, but is still part of the congregation. The board bears its kiss, a blackened oval that looks like a lesson. Lottie stammers. Mrs. Littleton sent for starch, cook called only for a moment, and the sentence dissolves into tears. You touch her shoulder. You are not a headline, you say. Not tonight. Not ever, if we can help it. Back in your kitchen, you set the iron upright in the sink like a naughty child in a cold bath and make lists. The first is practical, a stand that cannot be mistaken for a board, a hook for the cord, a rule chalked on the wall in a righteous hand, flat side faces heaven, always. The second is social, a meeting on Saturday for the women on your street, disguised as tea, titled Safety for Households Whose Husbands Love Modernity. Agnes nods at both lists like a general briefed on supply lines. I'll make a placard, she says, already drawing letters in the air. And perhaps we ask Mr. Braithwaite to tell a story about rigging. Men listen better when ropes are involved. Saturday produces a classroom out of your drawing room. Chairs turned to face your new electric chandelier that hums like a pet, but only if you know it can bite. 12 women arrive. Housekeepers, neighbours, the vicar's wife with her opinion needles, Mrs. Pevensey clutching a hatpin guard like a truce. You keep the tone brisk and unalarmed. We all agree we prefer not to die. you begin, to the kind of laugh that carries a little fear out of the room with it. Here are the rules we shall love as much as we love recipes. You show them the kettle, the frayed cord retired by a scissors ceremony, the replacement looped over a hook that keeps water from inviting itself to the party. You show them the iron flat side to heaven, never face down on boards, unplugged by the body, not the tail. You show them the shut valve the refrigerator man grudgingly installed, and make each woman in turn put her hand on it so the muscle will remember what to do when the brain is too occupied with staying alive. Dr. Baines appears at your elbow with a diagram under his arm and humility in his pocket. He is kind to your staff, addresses Sally as if she will live to 90 because she knows how to keep her lungs unexcited, listens to Lottie until the girl remembers she has a future that is not a cautionary tale. Mr. Braithwaite tells a shipyard story about men who learned to respect lines or fell off them into a salt lesson. And Mrs. Pevensey, surprised into affection for the useful, says, "Well, I never," in a tone that sounds suspiciously like, "Thank you." When the women leave, your husband comes in from a morning at the club full of men who think wires are interesting until they require paying for. He looks at the chalked rules, at the kettle on its hook, at the refrigerator sulking under its new tap, and then at you. "Do we live in a school?" he asks, not unkindly. "We live," you answer. The rest is punctuation. He smiles despite himself and presses a kiss to your temple as if rewarding a child for knowing a poem. "Very well," he says, the words men use when they have decided to admit improvement into houses they do not manage. "Very well." The week proceeds to test your newfound doctrine by sending Clara to you with a face that has learned hope and a letter from her mother that has not. "She found the bill," Clara says, holding out the paper as if it might bite. It reads like you expected. Theology disguised as fashion, economy disguised as concern. "She says men prefer lilies," Clara whispers, a sentiment ugly because it is beautiful to the wrong eyes. "Men prefer women who can stand," you say. "Ask any sensible man with stairs." You pour her lemonade and set on the tray a pair of walking laces with a breath of elastic in them. A present from Mrs. Linton for a girl who is learning. Clara touches them as if they are talismans. "I can walk to the park without stopping," she says. "I don't see stars when I pick up my sister." A look passes over her face, quick and private, and you decide not to ask the question that would turn hope into confession. "May I sit in the blue room?" she adds, and you wave her toward the sofa as if directing a ship to harbor. Ellen begins to alter without announcement. It is not a sudden bloom, it is a slow uncoiling. She reads standing sometimes now, one foot tucked behind the other, the way walking women rest. She catches her breath at windows, but not because she cannot breathe. Because she can. She practices looking men in the eye and not losing sight of herself on the way. Emblems of old training pop up, an over-attentive hand to hair, a reflexive sorry to furniture, and then fade more quickly each week, like bruises after a house stops hitting back. Emma grows like a child who believes the world is a game that will forgive her for playing it. She leaps from chairs your mother would never have allowed, and you, startled, watch as nothing catastrophic happens except your own heart making a case against what you insist on teaching it. Softness is not sin. She finds the switch in the nursery with the pleasure of a magician, and you reward her not with again, but with enough. She learns enough as a form of love, and you list this under the miracles you did not ask God for but got anyway. Your mother arrives one afternoon in a cloud of violet and a mood that could char wood. She sniffs the air as if searching for the scent of defiance. You see at once what has unseated her. A small jar, empty, labeled in your hand, for gardeners of faces, sits on her dressing table and has not been replenished because she will not ask for what she likes. You present her with 2 more jars and a scrap of ribbon so old-fashioned it hurts your eyes and not hers. "It is not slovenly," you say before she can say it, which startles her enough to skip the quarrel. "It is hygiene. Hygiene," she repeats, rolling the word in her mouth like a new sacrament. "Well, the roses have not fallen off my face." She sits, eyes your daughters the way generals inspect troops, and then so gently you almost miss it, looses her own laces a quarter-inch under her shawl. You say nothing. The house does not fall. She sips her tea and tells you Mrs. Pevensey has impaled a whole new species on her hat. The poor creatures, she says, and you wonder whether she means birds or neighbors. News arrives as it has learned to from the periphery. Constance writes, "We are pressing for standards, plugs that don't require courage, fuses that die before we do. A man at the Board of Trade is listening in that way men do when they have daughters." Lady Harberton sends a short note with a long sigh in it. A factory in Leeds has adopted our patterns for health corsets for the workroom. They call them supports to pacify the foreman. I do not care what men call salvation if it holds. You write back, with the steady practicality you are training into your pen. "We will host again," you tell Constance. "Men will come if sandwiches are cheaper than lawsuits. Dr. Baines can speak on fuses." You enclose, to Lady Harberton, a sheet of your chalked rules, soon, to be typed by a neighbor's nephew who coddles, machines with ink, and an offer to print. Them at your expense. The city provides your second. Case study, the one that makes your rules feel less like fussy housekeeping and more like scripture. It happens not in your kitchen, but in your neighbor's dining room across the square, a place where chairs are nervous and silver thinks highly of itself. The chandelier, a modern wonder with more ambition than balance, sparks during pudding and drops a single bead of incandescent complaint into the nap of the tablecloth. Someone laughs because someone always does when accidents put on formal wear. A footman lunges and misses. A woman shrieks because she has earned the right. Mrs. Carrington, more backbone than jewelry, which is saying something, picks up the entire tablecloth by its corners like a fisherwoman and yanks it neat off the table. Plates and pride and all, and drops the smoldering mess into the yard, where a gardener, who understands both hose and hierarchy, puts his boot on the closest edge and douses the rest. You hear the story the next morning with toast, and by noon you have reproduced it in your drawing room with a bedsheet and a safe candle, extinguished at once, your hands practiced. "We do not panic," you tell the assembled maids and housekeepers. "We move. We do not ask permission of the man at the head of the table if the table is on fire." Lottie, who has not yet forgiven herself for the iron, practices gathering and heaving until the motion enters her body like a song she'll always know. Your husband, who admires courage when it is well dressed, offers that the incident will be good for business because the baronet will require a different chandelier. You offer without rancor that it will be good for widows if baronets learn to buy fuses. He raises a hand in a gesture that says you have both won the point and taken it out of play. "I'll mention it," he says, which in a man with friends who sign checks is not nothing. In quieter hours, standards you can't see edge closer. The electrician returns with a boxy device he calls a cutout, which is a fuse by another name. "We'll put it here," he says, tapping the skirting board where wires congregate like gossipers. "If there's too much current, pop, and you sit peacefully in the dark instead of writing letters by the light of your curtains." You like anything that involves darkness as a plan. He notices your house rules and grins. "You'll make me obsolete, madam." You assure him you prefer him underemployed to under the stairs with a burned hand. Clara's mother relents with a pettiness that feels like a blessing. "You may wear the Linton garment in the mornings," she tells her daughter, "provided you remember we are not foreigners." You study the sentence for the malice and truth in it, then decide to focus on the clause that grants mornings. Mornings are long if you fill them with walking and refusal. Clara learns the geometry of stairs without fainting. She laughs in your back parlor without flinching. She writes you a note in a hand newly steady. "I can carry my sister. I did not know it was allowed to be this easy." Your own carrying shifts. You continue to shoulder dinners and charitable subscriptions and the mental arithmetic of keeping men happy enough to let women breathe. But something else has happened that you do not want to dramatize and cannot understate. The weariness that lived inside your bones like a tenant who never paid rent has begun subtly to pack. There are days when you forget to notice your ribs. There are hours when you sit, and the chair does not interrogate your spine. You do not wake with the taste of belladonna around your eyes when you catch a glimpse of yourself in the mirror at unprepared angles. The woman looking back no longer appears to be surviving her clothing. On a wet Thursday, Mr. Braithwaite brings a man you do not know, a stocky fellow with clean hands and a mind that has learned to sell caution to men who consider it unmanly. Insurance, Mr. Braithwaite says, as if introducing a cousin everyone needs to get along with. The man, Mr. Ainsworth, listens while you and Agnes describe the kettle and the iron and the chandelier and the refrigerator's opinion about lungs. He examines your chalked rules and the cutout, notes your insistence on shades and dry hands, nods at Dr. Baines's diagrams as if they reduce his claims rates. "This is the sort of house we like to insure," he says. "Your husband brightens like a man whose virtues have just been praised in the currency he understands. If you're amenable," Mr. Ainsworth continues, "I'd be grateful to take copies of your rules to offer our clients." You agree with the composure of a person who has been waiting for the world to ask her to be reasonable. Later, when the door closes, you and Agnes allow yourselves to grin like girls who have smuggled a book into a school. The summer tilts toward August. The air in London becomes a soup you drink standing up. Your health corset does not love it. It tolerates it. Your old corset lurks in a drawer where ironed things go to die. You bring it out twice for ceremonies that require lace and a truce with mothers. Each time you return home and unhook it with a care that looks like rage if you are alone. You are not alone often. Agnes has decided that nobody should rage alone, and manages to appear with cool cloths and muttered invective against evil boning whenever you require them. The girls grow the way girls do when nobody sands them down to fit into chairs, quickly and with opinions. Ellen reads a pamphlet on sanitation and asks the vicar an unanswerable question about drains after church. He blesses her curiosity and suggests she direct it at the council. Emma stages a picnic for dolls under the hallway table and enforces hatpin covers with a discipline that would impress Paris. Agnes, who has passed from servant to something more like co-conspirator you pay, catches you in the stairwell to report that the housemaid at number 12 fainted at the mangle and has been booked with Mrs. Linton for a fitting. "I told her mistress it would improve ironing," Agnes says, which is both a lie and the truth. At month's end, your mother sends 2 notes. The first is a brisk complaint about the chemist who tried to sell her a leaded powder while standing under a poster for modern health. She writes, "I instructed him in beeswax and virtue, which makes you laugh." The second is short, almost shy. "Your father prefers the cream. It smells like mornings we could afford." You tuck the note into your desk. You do not pin it where anyone might see what a woman can unwittingly confess. In the middle of the night, in a house made obedient by switches and women, you wake to thunder. Not the outdoors kind, the kind a city makes when one thing ends and another begins. You stand at the window and watch lightning laugh with rooftops. You think of all the wires in all the walls in all the houses in your square, humming with an energy that bends to you if you make rules it will respect. You think of all the laces being loosened a quarter inch at midnight by women who learned the word aloud from each other. You think of girls in rooms over shops, counting coin, counting breath, counting days. When sleep returns, it brings a dream that is less story than inventory. A tablecloth whipped clear of fire. A boy walking in a line of women because a lady told him to and he didn't die of it. A baronet buying a fuse because a shipbuilder tapped his cane. A girl laughing in your blue room because nothing was wrong with her except a century. A mother loosening her stays behind a fan. Morning comes. You are middle of the story, which is all anyone can ask to be. You tighten what must be tightened. Your schedule, the lid on the jar Emma left ajar, the ribbon on the parcel for Clara, and you loosen what must not. Your laces. Your hold on absolute control, your fear of being seen alive. Breakfast is kippers and letters. Agnes brings a broom to the scullery with a queen's bearing. The refrigerator hums and does not hiss. The iron rests on its stand like a penitent. The house obeys, because you decided obedience would include sense. Ellen appears in the doorway with cheeks weathered properly by sleep and reading. "Mother," she says, the way daughters do when what they are about to ask has been prepared in the quiet. "May I attend a lecture next week?" Dr. Garrett, Women's Health at the Hall. You consider all the ways the world has made daughters small by making education sound like vanity. Yes, you say. Take notes. Bring back the parts that scold and the parts that forgive. She beams. Emma snorts into her porridge and says through oats, I want to go to a lecture about cats, which seems to you an entirely reasonable platform on which to build a life. Your husband folds his paper as if it has answered his questions and says, I'll be late, without adding why. You nod. Your life has taught you that many late nights are less dangerous than one woman swallowing breath to keep a house agreeable. He pauses, then, perhaps remembering Dr. Baines, perhaps Mrs. Carrington's tablecloth, perhaps you on a bicycle, adds, I'll speak to Ainsworth about fuses for the office. We don't want a chandelier making a fool of us. You tilt your head in a gesture that means good and thank you. And progress is when men realize foolishness can burn down empires. You see him off. See the girls to their lessons. See Agnes to her errands. See yourself to your desk. Constance's latest circular sits there like a promise. Plans for a winter exhibition of walking clothes, boots made to respect sidewalks, children's garments that are tools rather than traps. You sharpen your pen and draft another letter offering rooms, sandwiches, quiet. When you sign your name, it looks like someone else is writing for a split second. Not because you have changed it, but because you have grown into it. By evening, the house has performed its modest miracles and expects no applause. You give it some anyway. Turn off switches with a knight's courtesy. Bless the refrigerator with a pat on its smug flank. Run a finger along the ironing board's new wide stand, as one might stroke an animal that has decided not to bite. Before bed, you open the window a thumb width and let the city's breath in. It smells of whetstone and horses and a little danger. You have learned how to ventilate danger, how to decant it from fashion and progress, how to pour it out the sash before it stains the carpet. You loosen your laces and your shoulders choose a better neighborhood between your ears. You lie back and allow your lungs to keep the metronome. Tomorrow, you suspect, will bring a fresh test, another pamphlet, a letter from a mother or a girl, a story about a fuse that behaved and a hatpin that did not. You are ready for all of it, not because you are a heroine, because you are ordinary on purpose, and you have decided ordinary can be taught to bite back when needed, and to kneel when useful, and to stand as default. Common sense, you have discovered, is not common until someone writes it on a wall and invites the neighbors. You have chalk, you have walls, and you have a hand that no longer trembles when it writes the rules. September arrives with pears heavy enough to concuss the inattentive, and a long, slanted light that behaves like forgiveness. You notice it first in the mirror, not your face, though that too has made peace with being alive, but the room behind you. Windows cracked as default, curtains choosing breeze over attitude. Change, you have learned, is not the trumpet blast of a coronation. It is the quiet decision to sleep with the sash up. The season brings its rituals. Coal men call and complain amiably about your insistence on dry cellars. A boy hawks papers on the corner in a treble that will someday be a baritone. Somewhere, a milliner threads a heron into a crime that will pass for fashion on Sunday. And in your house, breakfast is served beneath a chandelier that has been tamed by a fuse with the courage to die at the right moment. You count your blessings by function, not lace. The refrigerator keeps its gas to itself, humbled by the shut valve and your eye. The iron sits on its stand like a dog who has learned stay. The kettle's cord curls safely on its hook. You have made a liturgy out of flat-side faces heaven, dry hands, off first, then away, and in practice, it is less a litany than a reflex. Agnes could recite your rules backward in her sleep and occasionally does when startled, which has the amusing effect of turning danger into a backward poem. The post comes with its habitual mix of old world and rehearsal for the new. A letter from Lady Harberton, spare and unflappable, reports victories so reasonable, even men cannot posture against them. A factory adopting shoulder-supported stays as its standard issue. A draper in Manchester advertising supports for sense. The word corset discreetly banished from the ad's honest mouth. Constance writes on paper that smells faintly of violets and ink. Winter exhibition booked. Boots that respect pavements. capes cut for movement. A small corner devoted to things we no longer put on the face. Bring daughters. Bring patience, the warm kind. There is a note from Dr. Baines, thanking you for tea and introducing the phrase you have been longing to see in a man's hand. Household standard. He proposes a short printed card with drawings. Plug body, not cord tail. Shade every bulb. Cut out here. Valve there, to outlast speeches, he says. Speeches evaporate. Diagrams remain. You send him a draft within the hour. Agnes adding the illuminations of a woman who has avoided death by appliance twice in 1 week and would prefer not to do it a third time. Your mother's hand appears, familiar as ritual, thinner than pride admits. The letter is half scold, half confession, all mother. I suppose you will be pleased to learn, she writes, that I have instructed Mrs. Moss to loosen me a trifle on damp days. I refuse to credit your arguments. I credit the weather. Nevertheless, your cream persists in being agreeable. Your father attempted some on his nose and now claims to have invented it. You read the paragraph twice, not because you doubt your eyes, but because joy, too, benefits from repetition. Later, when she visits, you watch, and yes, behind a fan, beneath a shawl, her fingers flicker, a quarter inch, maybe 2, and the room does not fall, Ellen, taller, by the week, and administered by a conscience that reads pamphlets as if they were diary entries, attends Dr. Garrett's lecture with a seriousness that makes you imagine her in rooms where women do not have to knock twice. She returns flushed with learning and indignation. They demonstrated a rib cage, mother. An actual rib cage, flattened like a baking pan. The doctor called it the long deformity, as if language could shame bone into behaving. You pour tea and let her burn. She cools herself with notes and resolve. I have decided I prefer the phrase good lungs to good breeding, she announces, and you smile at the economy of that exchange rate. Emma convenes a congress of dolls beneath the sofa and legislates a world free of unreasonable hatpins. We will have covers, she declares, stabbing the air with a knitting needle repurposed as law. And ribbons that do not hurt ears. Her laws pass unanimously, much like real parliaments when the only voters are already convinced. Still you applaud. Tyranny starts small. So does sanity. Clara arrives on Tuesdays now as if you had invented the day. Her mornings are hers. Her afternoons still beholden to a mother who confuses propriety with allergy to oxygen. I walk to the park with my sister, she reports 1 week, and do not need to sit halfway. I ate a bun without catastrophe. I have discovered hunger is not a moral failing. She says the last sentence lightly, but you see its weight and love her for lifting it without grunting. On a drizzly Tuesday, she brings a sprig of rosemary and a question. Will it stay? She asks, meaning the comfort in her ribs, the sanity in her head. If I keep choosing it, yes, you say. It will stay enough. Not every hour, not every room, but enough. Then you add the sentence you wish someone had spoken into your young ear. And you are not weak when you lose ground for a day. You are wise when you take it back tomorrow. Your husband remains a man of his age with occasional flashes of the next. He still finds comfort in chairs that require a certain posture. He still prefers dinners where nothing dramatic happens except the pudding arriving tragically late. He still declares technologies marvelous in the same breath with which he forgets to read their instructions. And yet, he asks Mr. Ainsworth, the insurance man, to fit cutouts at his office. He warns a partner about iron-on boards. He tells an associate that his wife hosts sensible teas where useful. Things are said. He has stopped calling your health, Corsi that contraption, and begun calling it your sensible stays, which is the marital equivalent of a medal. He also, one evening you did not expect to be remarkable, says, you look, then stops, frowns at how many wrong words are available, and lands on capable. You mishear it at first because women are trained to expect adjectives that belong to furniture. When you understand, you thank him as if he has handed you something heavy he used to insist you should not carry. The city keeps its habit of testing households that dare to believe they have time to drink tea. A neighbor's scullery maid faints into a basket of starch. You send her to Mrs. Linton with an envelope you call coal money for your husband's sake and breathing money when you speak to God. A boy on the corner juggles plugs for pennies. You bribe him to juggle oranges instead and write a note to his mother explaining why you have meddled. The chemist who tried to sell your mother lead powder tries to sell you a tonic that is mostly Belladonna. You recite ingredients at him until he blushes and knocks 2p off a jar of cold cream just to see you go. You host again. Tea, diagrams, rules, and this time men appear in pairs, like animals that suspect a flood is coming and don't quite trust the ark. Mr. Braithwaite retells the tablecloth, rescue with the flourish of a man who has discovered he is good at stories that save carpets. Dr. Baines introduces a new drawing, a child's skeleton next to a little bodice with boning, unlaced and laid open like a confession. The room goes very quiet in that British way that does not draw attention to grief. A man coughs to disguise thinking. The vicar's wife speaks softly of choir fittings that will change this week, not next. When you clear the tea things, a husband stays behind to say, "My Amelia, she has been unwell." Would you write the name of your dressmaker? You do. You do it without triumph. You do it with the humility of a person who knows she is not clever. She is simply finished not saying obvious things. Autumn hardens. Coal returns like a stubborn relation. Your health corset and your winter cape make their small negotiations with the raw air and arrive at an armistice that leaves your lungs undefeated and your neck unchapped. Ellen reads in the window and becomes the sort of silhouette that should be on book plates. Emma learns to thread a needle and, with a solemnity unusual for her, stitches a little sachet labeled "Breathe" to hang on Sally's bedpost. So she remembers, Emma explains, as if Sally has not endured remembering. One morning, the post brings a pamphlet from a new magazine with a frank name promising truth about toasters, kettles, irons, cosmetics. We test. We tell. The editors recommend plugs that grip and powders that don't poison. You send for a subscription and 3 extras for the vicar, the insurance man, and Mrs. Pevensey with a sprig of holly and a note for the hatpin of your mind. You are not above enjoying the thought of her reading it after dinner and claiming loudly she knew all of it already. The year tilts toward its end. News creeps in from the world like a draft under doors. A queen grows frail. You think of bones outlasting fashion. A German engineer discovers something that will later frighten kettles into better behavior. A suffrage meeting is broken up across the river. You will attend the next. You mark these in your book in quiet pencil, as if writing too darkly would enable calamity. Between their entries, you write the smaller history that is actually altering the temperature of rooms. Mrs. Linton's apprentice has a bicycle. Clara's sister runs. Ellen's schoolmistress has ordered 3 health supports. Mother laughed without coughing. The new fuse popped politely. We carried the pudding to the yard and saved the table. On a cold afternoon, you go to the cemetery with Agnes. You bring rosemary for her mother and a ribbon for the girl Agnes was before duty laced her. You stand side by side, 2 women who have threaded themselves through different eyes of the same needle and say nothing for a very long time. Then Agnes, in that voice she uses when she's making a thing true by saying it aloud, inhales deeply and lets it go. Seems a waste, she murmurs, all those years of short breaths. You do not say we will be longer now. You do not need to. The wind conspirator carries your silence over stone. December comes with parlors, committees, the annual performance of goodwill that sometimes remembers to include good. You attend your mother's dinner with the old blue silk because strategy occasionally requires costume. You lace tighter than you like, looser than you used to, and carry the evening with competence that looks like grace from a distance. When you return home, Agnes appears as if conjured, hands ready, and you step out of history like a woman stepping out of wet boots. "Never again for long, Mom," she says, as if politely addressing your ribs. "No," you agree, too tired to be eloquent. On the year's last Sunday, the church is cold in that theatrical way that convinces congregations they are heroic. The vicar preaches on angels as if the word had not been used to domesticate half the pews for decades. Your mother sings in a key that has forgiven embarrassment. Ellen kneels without flinching because kneelers are made for knees, not corsets. Emma whispers to God about cats. You close your eyes and for a moment pretend the entire building is inhaling and exhaling with you, a great set of lungs shame left long ago. Walk home. Soup. A fire that respects its grate. Your husband stirs punch and recalls with tolerable humor the year your chandelier tried to roast the pudding. You toast Mr. Braithwaite, who looks pleased in the way old men do when they did something right and allowed someone else to say it. You send the girls to bed with novels that treat them like citizens. You and Agnes perform the night check. Plugs out, cords on hooks, iron upright, cut out armed, valve shut, windows a finger's width. The house, like a trained animal, settles into a posture that invites sleep rather than daring accident. Before you undress, you walk to the desk and open the drawer where you have kept the woodcut from the rally. A woman holding a child and a placard that reads, "Let me breathe." The paper has softened with being held. It smells of ink, dust, and your own skin. You add a note beneath it in your tidy hand, "We did." And then, because boastfulness is less dangerous than tight lacing and you are allowed one sin, you underline it. In your room, you unhook the sensible stays and rub the fading borders that used to script your torso. You stand at the window with your palm on the glass and watch the street perform its own bedtime. In the opposite house, a maid blows out a lamp with an expert's contempt. Beside her, the new bulb blinks and then behaves. A woman unwinds a hatpin and covers it because law made her and sense keeps her doing it. Somewhere, perhaps in 3 houses at once, ribs loosen under shawls. Small mercies stack like coal. When you slip into bed, your husband reaches for your hand, and for once you do not translate the gesture into a vow you have to keep alone. He holds it without commentary, as if he has learned that certain things do not need adjectives. The room is neither dark nor bright. It is a human room occupied by bodies that intend to live. You think of inheritance, not money, though that too requires guarding, but breath. You picture Ellen's daughters, girls whose lungs will be treated like tools, not ornaments, walking through parks in boots made to love sidewalks. You picture Emma's sons taught by their mother to put covers on sharp things and to respect women's diagonals across rooms. You picture Clara's sister carrying her own parcels. You picture your mother stepping into the next world, many years hence you insist, astonished to discover angels in sensible shoes. You also picture rooms beyond your street where none of this has yet occurred. Parlors where gas hisses and no one hears. Nurseries where girls learn to apologize as they exhale. Kitchens where irons nap face down. You do not despair. You plan sandwiches. Sleep comes like proof. In it, your dream is not gilded with allegory. You are simply walking, boots, cape, a hat that behaves, lungs like good bellows, down a road that used to be wrong for you and is now correct. On one side a cart rattles, on the other a child runs. Somewhere a switch clicks on, off, on like a heartbeat you can control. The horizon does not recede. It keeps pace, companionable, as if it has learned better manners. You wake at a reasonable hour to a house that has decided to partner with you. You lace lightly. You open the window completely. You pour tea, no shock. You write the day's list. Breathing embedded between letter to Constance and inspect cord, as if air were a task you might forget to do. You will add errands as they appear. A chemist to scold, a boy to bribe out of danger, a skirt to shorten by a single respectable inch. You will forget something and forgive yourself quickly. You will ask Agnes for help and mean it. You will answer your mother gently and mean it most of the time. At the bottom of the list you write what has become your only rule that does not require a chalkboard. Do not make beauty out of suffering. Make history out of breath. Then you set down the pencil, stand, and begin again the work that is not dramatic and therefore saves the world. Opening windows, loosening a handwidth, tying laces that do not conspire, teaching girls to walk without apology, hosting tea where men listen and women do not faint, turning off a switch with respect, placing the iron upright even when you are tired, passing along a recipe for a cream that does not bite, tucking a pamphlet into a prayer book, applauding a fuse, laughing at a chandelier, loving your own living. And when night returns, as surely as fashion returns to try old tricks in new fabrics, you will do what resistance looks like in the ledger of a single household. You will sleep breathing freely under a roof that learned your rules, beside a man learning his inner city learning its, and you will dream without shame of daughters inheriting not your corsets but your air.